to all of you for joining us. Today, we're celebrating the International Translation Day for 2024. My name is Jeanette Stewart, and I'm the founder of Translation Commons. A small introduction on Translation Commons for those of you who are joining us for the first time. Translation Commons is a nonprofit community of language professionals and technology experts. Our mission is to equalize the digital divide by enabling digital opportunities for minority and indigenous languages. We strive for digital inclusion so no language and no linguist is left behind. Our team of volunteers create free resources, tools, and online events such as the one today. We are excited to host today's celebration event. This is the third online event celebrating the International Translation Day, with the first one in 2022. All of our online events, including celebrations of other international days, are in partnership with UNESCO Secretariat of the International Decade of Indigenous Languages. The overall arching theme for today is translation and art worth protecting, moral and material rights for indigenous languages. We are honored to have the participation of experts from various fields who will share their knowledge and experiences. We are fortunate to have a wonderful volunteer staff that is producing this event. We are grateful to each and every one of you for your time, energy, and thoughtful participation. Opening today's celebration is Dr. Tawix Jelassi, Assistant Director General for Communication and Information Sector at UNESCO in France.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jeanette, esteemed colleagues, honored guests, I'm making this statement on behalf of Mr. Tawix Jelassi, the UNESCO Assistant Director General for Communication and Information, that was not able to make it for today's meeting, but he is with us in spirit. Your presence here is truly appreciated, and I extend my deepest gratitude to our co-organizer, Translation Commons, for their invaluable leadership and cooperation in making this event once again possible. In my brief remarks, I want to underscore the vital work of translators and the urgent need to protect the diversity of languages. As we celebrate International Translation Day, we honor the translators, interpreters, and language professionals who ensure that intercultural and multilingual communication thrives. Their dedication fosters understanding and cooperation among people and societies across the globe. At UNESCO, we recognize translation as an indispensable bridge that facilitates dialogue and collaboration among our member states. Through translation, we transcend linguistic barriers and connect in meaningful ways. But translation does more than just enable communication. It sustains the visibility and vibrancy of all languages. Translators are custodians of culture, bridging gaps between languages and ensuring that every voice is heard and respected. UNESCO is deeply committed to defending the fundamental rights to use one's language without fear of discrimination. This is essential for cultural preservation, inclusiveness, and the creation of open societies. However, we face significant challenges. The situation of indigenous languages worldwide is particularly dire. We've all seen statistics that reflect this. This alarming statistics about the current situation of indigenous languages is also one of the reasons why UNESCO co-lead the International Decade of Indigenous Languages that was launched in 2022. One of the key goals of this decade is to increase the functional usage of indigenous languages in as many domains as possible. A notable example of these efforts is the UNESCO Brazilia's Office partnership with Motorola and Lenovo, integrating indigenous languages like Kiangang and Nyangatu into smart face interfaces. This is just one example where our work together with translators is an important element of promoting indigenous languages in a digital age. To further strengthen the International Decade of Indigenous Languages, UNESCO member states are developing national action plans. And currently, we have about 14 of them that are finalized. For example, Norway's plan that talks about translation into Northern Sami, or many other examples. Translation can also be an empowering tool. In the Sepur Zurca case in Guatemala, UN Women facilitated the translation of court proceedings into 6 Mayan languages. This crucial effort ensured that the voices of Maya women victims were heard, leading to a landmark judgment and transformative reparations. This shows the power of translations. Ladies and gentlemen, languages are not just tools for communication. They are the livelihood of cultural heritage, identity, and spirit. By honoring and preserving these languages, we protect the essence of the world's diverse communities. As a Native American writer, Louise Erdrich eloquently expressed, to engage in the language is to engage the spirit. There is a spirit or an original genius belonging to each word. On this International Translation Day, let us reaffirm our commitment to preserving the rich tapestry of languages. Let us also honor the translators, interpreters, and language professionals who work tirelessly and preserve and promote this linguistic diversity. By supporting their efforts, we help protect the richness of human fabric, ensuring that languages is part of our future generations. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Jaco. Our next speaker is Ms. Alison Rodriguez, President of the International Federation of Translators from New Zealand.
Good morning. My name is Alison Rodriguez, President of the International Federation of Translators, the global federation of associations of translators, interpreters, and terminologists. And I'm glad to be here today to once again participate in the Translation Commons celebration of both International Translation Day and Indigenous Languages. And it's been my absolute honor and a privilege to have been a part of every Translation Commons International Translation Day event. And I'd like to thank Jeanette Stewart and her team and all the wonderful presenters that have contributed to these events and made them such a success in marking International Translation Day. Because it's something that we at FIT are very passionate about promoting and celebrating, because it's our day. So from its creation in 1953, FIT has been advocating for professional translators, interpreters, and terminologists. And for over half of its 70 years of existence, FIT has celebrated and promoted the recognition of the 30th of September as International Translation Day. Each year, FIT Council creates an annual theme as a basis for the celebrations. And since 2017, the 30th of September has been an official UN International Translation Day to be celebrated across the entire UN Global Network in honor of professional translators, interpreters, and terminologists' contribution in connecting nations and fostering peace and global development, as well as in strengthening trust, mutual understanding between nations. So this year, in line with our global effort to promote the visibility of the profession for all languages, both signed and spoken, our theme turns to the future, to protecting the sustainability of the profession and the globe's multitude of languages that contain the rich traditions of our human history, a history that is contained within our memories as much as it is in our languages. Indigenous languages, with their role in intergenerational transfer of intangible cultural heritage and knowledge, will assist us in facing future global challenges such as equality in global development and climate change. But if only we could get people to be as passionate about protecting endangered languages as they are about protecting endangered species. So this year, our theme focuses on protecting as much as it does on celebrating, and it's translation and art worth protecting. So inspired by issues surrounding copyright, the year's theme is first and foremost focused on copyright, promoting the recognition of translations as original creative works in their own right, owed the benefit of copyright protection under the Berne Convention. But the theme also reflects on many other areas, such as protecting the future of the profession, protecting translators' moral and material rights, and protecting working conditions. Copyright-related issues extend far into all areas of the profession, including the use of translations in the cultural sector, literary translation, publishing, and legal translation. And with the development of AI and the expansion of the digital sphere, we're also concerned about the implications of copyright for translators, interpreters, and terminologists, because these have increased exponentially. We're more concerned now about attribution of translations, for example, in the digital sphere than we've ever been. So in addition to allowing translators to receive recognitions for their efforts, this attribution clearly signals the source of a text, identifying it as either human or AI-generated content. Now, AI is undoubtedly going to be a part of the future, and there's no reason that it cannot sit comfortably alongside our heritage, our tradition, and all the world's cultures and languages, as long as we get it right on the use, on the ethics, and on the implementation. So our profession is important in preserving the past and shaping the future. So it's pleasing to see that the UN is considering a draft resolution on multilingualism. It seeks, among other things, to explore additional technologies with appropriate quality controls, compliance with relevant resolutions to address multilingualism and accessibility, to embrace the opportunities offered by new information and communications technologies, and to ensure that technological infrastructures and support applications fully support Latin, non-Latin, and bidirectional scripts in order to enhance equality. Now, this is something to acknowledge on International Translation Day, because indirectly it celebrates not just translation, but languages, diversity, multilingualism, and multiculturalism, as well as global peace, understanding, and development. In this, the International Decade of Indigenous Languages. So we celebrate translators, interpreters, and terminologists, their achievements and their craft, whatever their languages. And this 30th of September, FIT sends you its warmest wishes for a very happy International Translation Day. Thank you.
Jeanette, you're mute.
Thank you. Our first session is moderated by Dr. Jadyala Prabhakar Rao, Professor of Linguistics in the University of Hyderabad in India.
So, thank you, Janet. I welcome all the panelists, participants to this first session on ethical issues in translating indigenous languages. As we know that when the emerging technologies, especially AI tools, are being used in many areas, including translation, there are many ethical issues are coming into fore. So that's why there is a need to have a detailed discussion on various aspects of using of AI tools, especially when these AI tools are being implemented on indigenous languages in the area of translation. So in this session, we are going to have the opinion of eminent scholars in the translation, in the use of AI tools to translate indigenous languages. and they are going to tell us now how different communities, different indigenous communities are involved in working in designing AI tools, and also how the data mining helps to protect these languages, and also what are the issues, ethical issues involved in that, and how communities in general can be involved in the whole process of designing and implementing AI tools in the translation, especially to from indigenous languages. So, with these few words of introduction, I will now request Dorothy Gordon, who is actually an eminent scholar in the field of translation, in the field of AI tools and AI technologies, and she was, as we know, she was IFAP chairman thrice. She has very rich experience in this area. So now I request Dorothy Gordon to share her ideas, to start the discussion on ethical issues in translating indigenous languages. So each speaker panelist will be given 4 minutes time initially. So after all panelists will speak, again we will come back and discuss the issues in detail. So I may request now Dorothy Gordon to share her ideas.
Thank you, Professor Rao. First, let me correct this wrong impression. I am not an expert on translation, but I do work quite a bit on multilingualism online. And please, Prabhakar, wave to me when 4 minutes are up, because I've been known to talk too much. I must say that I'm very worried now, as somebody who has been in this field for some time, because we are actually getting traction. We are seeing more and more attention being given to African languages. And when I speak to those involved, they're equally worried. And there are a few things that are worrying us that I will mention, that I think that others in the panel will also take up, because I'm pretty sure we are seeing this across the board when it comes to low resource languages. The first thing that we are seeing is a lot of the work that's being done is being driven by major companies. And the end goal is for commercial purposes. They're getting enough of the language translated so that they can actually develop marketing tools and other tools online. This means that the approach to translation does not necessarily link in the custodians of the language, the actual people in the communities. You could be, for example, in Akan, you want to do some Akan translation, you go to a German university, find somebody doing Akan as a PhD, and get them to help you out. But the kind of language that they would speak is not necessarily the kind of language that will be spoken in for example, in our House of Chiefs, where we have specialist linguists. And so the nature of the language is being changed. It's being made far more simple than it is in reality. And unfortunately, that language is going to be the language as defined online, and that people will think that's the language. So that's one, concern, that community is not involved enough, at least when it comes to African languages. It's tended to be very much the linguist. It's tended to be big companies, not necessarily the people who speak the language best and who are the custodians of the culture. I'm hoping it's different in other places. The second thing is that because of this, and this is not just for language, this is a problem that we're observing across the board. We see there's some kind of capture of the open movement by big companies. So the language developers here, those who are working on natural language processing, will tell me, Well, a big company will give you $20,000 to do some work on one of the low resource languages. But the stipulation is it must be open data. And so for the $20,000, you give away your data. And in principle, I have always been a supporter of the open movement. I love it. I've spent 20 years of my life promoting open source and open data. But I think we have to rethink and tweak that model a little bit, because what we are seeing is it's a new form of exploitation. You get people to work for you to get the language developed enough online to do the translation so that you can do big business, but you don't really pay them what that's worth. And we're thinking of how we can get the custodians. We have chiefs, so they are in charge of the community. How can we manage this in such a way that the chiefs will be able to collect, that the data will be sold, or there's some kind of recompense so that it can drive further language projects within the community? And I think I'll stop there so I don't talk so much. But really, we're very worried that they're leveraging proprietary values into this whole area of free data. And in essence, getting people to work for capitalists for free. I think that they used to have an S word for that, but I will not mention that here. But it's a very delicate situation, and everybody wants us to figure out how we can remain open without being exploited. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy Gordon, for your valuable comments. Actually, there is a need to involve communities. Unfortunately, they are not involved. And with regard to the data, open data, this is not only with the languages. This is being done because the multinational companies take data regarding the ecology, flora and fauna, and they use that data, but they are not even acknowledged and they are not being paid much. So this is happening with in other areas also, not only languages. Actually, I think it is very interesting to listen to Professor Ellen Emilson, who would like to speak how the communities, indigenous communal translation contribute to the ethical handling of issues, and what are the guidelines that can be worked out in this process. So could you please throw some light on it, Professor Ellen Emilson?
As Dora, hi, good morning, everybody. Good evening, everybody. As Dorothy has also said, we are, I cannot say I'm an expert, but it is true that I'm very much involved in this kind of situation. And I would like to introduce you to Nelson Martinez, who is a colleague and a friend. He's a Zapotec in the northern part of, in the western part of Mexico. And he, just very, very briefly, he will tell you he will speak a few words in Spanish, I mean in Zapotec language, and and I will do a little bit of translation into what he has to say, because he's the person who has been doing this kind of exercise in communal translation. So Nelson, could you please speak?
Yeah. Nelson, could you speak? Professor Nelson? Professor Nelson?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Yes,
We have
Yes.
little time. We have only 4
Yeah.
minutes for each panelist.
Yeah.
So,
Darius derali ni alia Nelson Martinez nacha kish hidai li karo de tudiza lu liza shiza ganak bayuj ganet tu gak ketuji a le nak ganadu tu len jas ke kan yuz tu garu itu di zaleng garani itu kakak gak jing ni gak tu di za yazi kakak yuz nak yelag tu di za ke kan yuz yelag tu di za ke kan yazi ka yuz ganadu kan even ni ga tus ga tu ne jing len yazi kakales yelag tu di za ni nak bayuj ga di za shiza len gata di za ki kane shustugul ve kane len yazi ka di za gula kwa anste len ganaza gui tu di za len kan di za na kwa kan lu yezil yu ga zituni escleno elen adelante.
Yeah, so what Nelson has said in his language, Dizashidza, which is one of the Zapotec languages in southwestern Mexico. And he's saying community translation has as its main purpose the mutual, collective, reciprocal benefit of a community and between communities in the same region that speak or master the same language. For this purpose, there may be different types of translation, namely community, intercommunity, collective, collaborative, and cooperative translation. Community translation is a strategy to keep the Dija Shidza language alive and preserve the intercultural communication that our ancestors have been carrying out since ancient times and that currently maintain dialogue with the languages of the world on the web. And just this, I put this little infographic to give you examples of what Nelson has done and the people that are involved, this photograph. And he has done translation from he and the team, of course. And this has enriched their awareness of the value of their language and their knowledge, because they have done translation. These are books that are for children. One is on nanotechnology, and as Nelson has mentioned to me, he demanded of Noboru Takumechi. He's a Japanese researcher based in Mexico, very multicultural already, and he asked to make sure that the knowledge, the communal knowledge, would also be disseminated. And so he has written, with his, with the people in the community, work on numbers, time, and knowledge about the universe by the Zapotec communities. So I'll leave it there to enrich the discussion.
Thank you, Professor Ellen, for giving concrete example. Actually, as Dorothy mentioned, that these communities, indigenous communities, are being exploited, and they are not being given the place that they deserve in this entire exercise. Now, I think Professor Maria Odli Juncker, she has a very good, experience and research in the area of how indigenous speakers are struggling to protect themselves, their languages, from data mining and also misinformation. And I think she has done a great deal of work in this area. Now, I request her to share some of her thoughts on this. I think you have to unmute, man. You have to unmute.
Sorry. Thank you. I'm going to pick up on what Dorothy said. I just want to add one more thing, Dorothy, to what you said, especially in Africa. I believe it's not just commercial entities that are into data mining. It's also authoritarian regimes who have all kinds of vested interest for natural resources. There is actually a parallelism in this new imperialism, after the forest, after the soil, now the language, right? And My experience has been with data mining in the last year on a large project that I direct, which is the Algonquian Dictionaries and Linguistic Atlas project. I don't have time to give all the details. I've actually written a paper, and I can give you the link to the paper on those things. But just as it relates to Translation Day, I would like to just show 3 little examples of what I think is happening, both with data mining and the lack of ethics in that respect, and as well as the AI agents, human and AI agents feeding back and really damaging the language with practices. Because what is important is, you know, we human, probably that AI will be very useful, but we're not very wise with new technologies. When a new technology comes to us, we're not very wise, we human, in how to use it. And so my plea would be, please don't try it out on indigenous languages and people. Try it with big languages. Try it with languages where you have a lot of data, right? Because for indigenous languages, once you've shown that the thing is reliable and works, then move to indigenous languages, but don't start with vulnerable languages. So I'm going to share my screen quickly to show you a few things. So in 2023, we were the victim, I would say, of 3 events of data extraction that we know of. I'm sure there were lots more. And this has really, you know, we had always been doing open source stuff and API availability. We were trying to make all our data communicate, and the goal of the Linguistic Atlas and the dictionaries were to connect people who did not have government support but shared a common language. But we had to halt all those developments because of data mining. In my paper that you can read, I have 3 examples that are typical. The second one, the bad, data extraction without permission, concerns people who were doing machine translation and fed our data. They just took the data from one of the dictionaries with a data scraper, and because we didn't give permission, so they just went ahead anyway. It wasn't available to the public, and they built their machine, and they were caught later at the conference. But you can read all that in my paper, so I'm gonna move on and show you potential misuse of tools. This is the case of a human misuse, but because the data is then fed into the World Wide Web, it will be picked up by intelligent agents. So this case is about correctional services in Quebec that contacted me, wondering why their prisoners couldn't read the syllabics of what they were doing. But what they were actually doing, they were confusing our syllabic converters that converts Roman orthography to syllabic orthography with a Google Translate. And so they were actually feeding French text into the syllabic converters. And that was further disempowering the indigenous prisoners, because these indigenous prisoners somehow knew how to read the syllabic a little bit, but then they felt really, they couldn't read it. Of course, they couldn't read it. This was not a translator. This was a syllabic converter, right? So the second thing I want to show you, this is very recent. It's not in my paper. And it's about hallucinations and potential further misuse, because we have something now that we discovered in August called Freedom GPT Wiki Freedom article that came out on the Innu language. It shows up, unfortunately, as the 4th, 5th, or 8th result in Google searches. You can see here a Google search, and that website, that wiki generated by AI, shows up, doesn't show up in DuckDuckGo, which is good. And what this page is, you can look it yourself, do Innu grammar or Innu Aimun syntax. It will come up in Google searches. And I don't want to give it too much publicity, but it's really pure gibberish. It's beyond gibberish. It's, unfortunately, as we know, research have shown that while humans are pretty good at identifying human-made misinformation, the eloquence of the AI tool makes it very difficult for, say, students. I'm wearing orange because it's International Truth and Reconciliation Day in Canada today, together with Translation Day. And imagine pupils in high schools who do research on Google. They get to the fourth result. They want to find out about Indigenous languages in Canada, and they get this gibberish. It's really the words they give, the sentences. They must have come to Inuktitut with Inu. It is mind-blowing that what kind of commercial model is behind Google that brings up such a wrong and bad page. And this is further, if that further feeds the models that are being trained, our baby AIs, I'm very worried. Thank you. Oh, did I not share my screen?
Prabhakar, you're muted.
Did I not share my screen? Hello?
Yeah, now it is there. Now
No,
it is there.
Oh, all this time I was not sharing my screen, so that's what I was showing. Sorry, you should have
Yes,
told
yes.
me. I was sharing. I was
Yeah,
telling you about.
But you can quickly show.
Yeah, so this was, you can read in my paper, this event about the data mining without permission. There was something even worse with a commercial entity taking the data and selling it back to the indigenous people, but you can read in my paper. But this was the syllabic converter, and that was the French text, and that was what the Naskapi speakers couldn't read, and the prisoners. And then this is the Google search that shows this Freedom GPT article that shows up at the fourth result, or fifth or eighth, depending on what you search.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. You can remove. Thank you very much. You have come up with very concrete examples and showed us how this data mining is being done by the companies and how they are actually exploiting the indigenous people, indigenous communities, indigenous languages. Now we will hear the final speaker of this session, that is Mr. Kaviti Whiteford. And sir, how do you think actually what are the ethical issues that could be dealt with while we are working on AI tools for indigenous languages, and how do you look at it?
Morena tātou mā. I'll start with a waiata from our land here in Aotearoa. Nei rā te kaupapa o te reo Māori e, he taonga tuku I hono ngā tūpuna, he pāre kawa he mea hira e, tōku reo tōku ohoho, mā pihi maurea, whakakai Māori. Tui a te rangi, tui a te whenua, tui a ki te moana I rongo te pō, I rongo te ao, tihei Māori ora. As has been said, my name is Kawiti Waitford. I hail from the Indigenous Māori tribes of Aotearoa, New Zealand, Ngāti Wai, Ngāti Hine, Ngāpuhi, Te Rarawa. The land and spirit of my people, my reo, my language acknowledges everyone here today, though it is about 3 a.m. here in New Zealand, so forgive me if I'm a bit blurry-eyed. It's an honour to be a part of the panel discussion for International Translation Day. I am a translator, opera singer, interpreter, registered with Te Taurāwhiri o Te Reo Māori, the Māori Language Commission here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. As a first language speaker of Te Reo Māori, I've had the privilege of being part of the first generation raised within the Māori language revitalisation movement, which was at risk of extinction. Though through Kohanga Reo and Kura Kaupapa Māori, our full immersion education system. Today, as a translator and cultural advisor, I kind of work across a broad range of sectors, including media and the arts, government, community, and publishing. My role is not just about translating words, but advocating for the preservation and protection of our language, culture, and worldview. As a practitioner, I'm passionate about maintaining the integrity of our language and its unique worldview in translation, especially in today's global multilingual landscape. The advent of AI and large offshore language learning models presents both opportunities and challenges for Indigenous languages, like Te Reo Māori. While technology has the potential to broaden access and support language learning, it also raises those important questions about cultural integrity, ownership, and data sovereignty. Te Reo Māori isn't just a tool for communication, it's a medium for communicating worldview, values, inherent ways of being and engaging with our taiao, our natural world, and with our whakapapa, our genealogical connection to the land and the sky and everything in between. Translating Te Reo Māori into English, a language shaped by Western paradigms and underlying values of capitalism, extractive practices, and scientific reductionism, brings it both opportunities and challenges. The nuances of te reo are often inextricably linked to cultural concepts and worldviews that clash with these paradigms, and don't have that direct equivalent in English. So at times we face ethical dilemmas in translation when accuracy or broader cultural sensitivities can't be fully conveyed in the approximate expression of meaning in the target language. Some concepts or cultural nuances from the source language may not have direct equivalents in the target language, leading to important aspects of the original message being lost, misunderstood, or misrepresented. He rei niho me kauai prawa. To have sperm whale teeth, one must also have sperm whale, a sperm whale's jaw. This is a proverb or whakatauki that refers to the majesty and power of the giant sperm whale, which our rangatira or our leaders, our chiefs, are often likened to. And it serves as a reminder that great endeavors must be built on the right foundations. So just as the wisdom of our ancestors are rooted in the strength and integrity, our language cannot simply be translated without considering the worldview that informs it. So to translate Te Reo Māori, is to translate our cultural identity, values, and history, which must be respected and upheld throughout the process. Translating worldviews, especially from an Indigenous language to another, presents unique challenges. Languages are deeply tied to the cultural perspectives and philosophies of the people who speak them. When we translate an Indigenous language, we're not merely converting words from one language to another, we're transferring an entire worldview. This process requires careful thought and sensitivity to ensure that the depth of meaning, cultural context, and the spirit of the original language are preserved. How do we ensure that the translation doesn't distort or dilute the worldview embedded in the Indigenous language? The rise of large language models further complicates the issue. How do we ensure that these developing technologies don't reduce Indigenous languages and worldviews to fit the framework of the target language's worldview? The values and priorities driving these models are often not aligned with Indigenous perspectives. What principles are the core of these LLMs when they handle the translation of Indigenous languages? All of these questions. These models may prioritize speed and efficiency, but the delicate nuances and cultural depth of Indigenous languages require a more thoughtful and deliberate approach. One of the biggest challenges in translation is conveying meaning between languages that operate differently. Some languages, like many Indigenous languages, have highly specific words or particular concepts that reflect deep cultural understanding. Others languages may lack these direct equivalents, relying instead on lengthy explanations or approximations. So how do we maintain the integrity of these specific terms without losing their cultural significance in translation? I often receive requests much like, yes.
Can you please conclude? Can you please conclude?
Done.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. You have raised a very interesting question. The cultural identity, culture. Once I think the great German scholar Wilhelm Humboldt has actually mentioned about cultural identity and how language is related with the worldview, culture, then people identity, history, etc. So I think it's very interesting. Now, actually, recently, the recent UN General Assembly has come up with Global Digital Initiative. So in this Global Digital Initiative, now I think modalities have to be still worked out. But what we can do is, in this actually the concept framework of global digital initiative, how the translation, the ethics of translation, and the guidelines for translation and policies for translation can be worked out. So I request 4 panelists to quickly throw 2 minutes. Just how do you think? So in the context of UN Global Digital Initiative, what is the role of translation and the ethical issues of translation? Please, I think Dorothy, with her great experience in UN structures, UNESCO structures, can tell us, can guide us.
I think, Prabhakar, I don't think we are there yet. I think that we have to acknowledge this is what they call a wicked problem. This is a problem that does not have an obvious solution. But when you're faced with that kind of problem, you obviously need greater consultation. So the first thing I would say, one of the people from YouTube had mentioned that what we are seeing at the moment, if I can read the comment, is like strip mining. It is colonial, industrialist, linguistic strip mining. And the impact on our languages is just as awful, if not even worse, than what strip mining does to the environment. And so just as our colleague from New Zealand mentioned, we're losing our worldview. We're losing a perspective on how humans interact with nature and with each other. And it's just pushing a particular culture. And we have to figure out, as people who are on sort of the wrong end of this, who are facing, we are the weaker partners in this power asymmetry. So we have to figure out what is it that we can do. And I think, first of all, people like Marie Odile who are publishing papers, getting more attention, but I think that we need to consciously have a lot more PR around this. We have been so ecstatic for so long that at last our languages are being documented and translated, but we don't want it to be done this way. So we have to sit together and figure out how we are going to change the approach. Maybe the others have better ideas, but I think we have to really think about this. I know I'm not there yet in terms of a solution. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Dorothy. What about Ellen? How do you think?
I was asking Nelson to send me his opinions, but of course, you and all of us, but especially Marie Odile and Dorothy have said, placed the finger on the problems. Of course, Kawiti has also done that, and it's very, very clear that there needs to be a very strong set of policies coming from the different states, different governments that are created to protect these environments. I agree fully with Dorothy that the real wicked part is that this process of translation and the entrance of indigenous languages into the world of technology and AI actually maybe and is changing the worldviews, where we know the worldviews of indigenous communities are the ones that we need to adopt as globally, because of all the damage that modern society and AI and technology and just in general the industrialization has created. So my take, at least, and I'll be interested in seeing what Nelson has to say, is that one, definitely there need to be very strong policies, and well, our government right now in Mexico hopefully will address this issue. We are, at least as collective groups, are working on that, towards that, and also communities have to wake up, and as Nelson is doing his part, at least working on communal translation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So what is your idea, Professor Maria Odli Juncker, on how to work out the guidelines within the framework of UN Global Digital Initiative? How do you think?
Well, I'm going to share my screen this time. So I think there are some issues that need to be discussed. One is the economic imbalance. Is there any compensation that is planned? Who is driving this agenda? For sure. I'm summarizing things other panelists have said, Is extractable data on the web a free natural resource? And how is AI feeding into the devolution of the language? I want to just add maybe two little anecdotes to conclude, because there is something Indigenous languages have to teach us. And one I would say is to slow down. Those languages have developed over thousands of years, like a rainforest, very slowly. And the AI revolution is going too fast. Everybody agrees. We need to push the pause button and think before we make too many mistakes. It is telling that neologism, like Eileen and
Nelson
discussed, also give us an interesting view of how the community perceives the revolutions that are put upon them. When the Cree in Quebec came up with a word for the freezer, they called it the stingy box. The stingy box, literally, because before people were sharing the food they hunted. Once they got the freezer, they could be more individualistic and keep their food to themselves. With the cell phone, the name for the cell phone the elders came up with is the little distracting machine. Again, they observed a shift, the elders, with the behavior of younger people, with the little machine that distracts you. Finally, maybe if there is something maybe that the big players of the world could do, I would suggest is many of these languages are verb-based languages. They view the world as processes. So in order to properly translate, you first need to translate English that is full of nouns, that imposes nominalization on those languages. Can you have a translator of English into verbs, into a verb language first? That would really help the local translators to then do translation themselves. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Then what is the idea of Kiviti on this? Quickly, we have very little time.
I mean, I agree with everybody else, what everybody else is saying. I continually get messages from large corporations as a Māori translator asking to, translate all this nonsense gibberish, and it's getting more and more prevalent, and it's concerning. Our language is tapu. It's sacred, and how we talk about worldview and how that goes side by side with language translation. There is a generational shifts happening where the practices that stem out of our worldview, that is our connection to, as you said, via Marie, our relationship with our environment, because our languages stem from our environment, and the practices we as Indigenous people practice over thousands of years. When we're in this paradigm paradigm shift to a Western way of operating and living, I love that, the little stingy box. There's quite a lot of words similar that when our elders encounter these changes and shifts in how we relate to one another and our environment, these types of words are coined. For our generations coming, there's this huge shift of language reclamation, and what does that mean in a modern day world and in the modern sense. And so it's a double-edged sword. How technology is not going anywhere. How do we use it? How do we get to the base level and develop it with these big corporations? But at the end of the day, it's money, really. or these economic drivers, and how do you compete with that when and I just want to mihi to Peter Lucas Jones and Te Hiku Media here in Te Taitokiro in the northern region of New Zealand, Aotearoa, New Zealand, who have been developing Māori-based kaitiakitanga license, I think is the term that they use, to put in place policies for the development of AI usage with Te Reo Māori. And I think that's a solution that's ground-based that could be looked at.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kiviti. As I see, all the panelists, of course, audience, participants, everyone has very rich ideas on how to develop these frameworks and what are the issues that can be involved in developing the ethical frameworks, especially while developing AI tools for translation. I think Translation Commons can have a separate discussion, can initiate separate discussion on this so that we can have a detailed debate on this. And as you know, the Global AI Ethics Network for Social Good, which we have started, can also be part of it, and we can organize a separate discussion on this. And Translation Commons and Global AI Ethics Network for Social Good can work together and can have a separate discussion on this. And now, if there are any questions from the audience to the panelists quickly, can you answer? We will start with Dorothy. Dorothy, do you have any questions from audience?
Professor Rao, there is one question from all the panelists, to any of the panelists, basically, which is, what are the possible steps to be taken to prevent exploitation of indigenous and minority language data mining?
Okay. Who will answer? I think Professor Maria is the right person to answer because she is working on data mining.
Yeah, I'm not working on data mining. I was forced into it. There are, I think, that's why I said slow down, because the regulation, national, international, and the principles have not caught up with that fact. One of the group that was data mined consulted lawyers to try to get protected, and no law firm could help them because they said the laws are not ready for that.
Thank you.
So
Thank you very much.
Intellectual property laws are not in place to protect people.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I thank all the panelists for their valuable contributions and valuable ideas, sharing these ideas. And as I said, just I think Janit and myself can work out a separate event to discuss further on this and take as many people as into the discussion so that we can come up with some concrete sessions. Thank you very much. I thank once again all the panelists and also Janit for giving me this opportunity, and audience, participants, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great information we got from all the panelists, but we're moving to the next session now, which is moderated by Dr. Rabatla Siva Prasad, former honorary professor of CDLTR and professor of anthropology at the University of Hyderabad in India.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. There are 4 presentations on this. The first presentation is by Dr. Samar Sinha, who teaches in the Department of Nepali and Center for Endangered Languages, and his basic interest is to look at the linguistic structures and also the architecture and modality in syntax theory, and basically from the data, from the signed languages, Nepali language varieties, and endangered languages. He actually collaborates with speakers of endangered languages of the Himalayas Basically, his idea was to document and describe the languages, institutions, and foodways, and with writers on translation. Apart from that, besides teaching and research, he also leads Center for Endangered Languages in Sikkim University. Over to Dr. Samas now. The 10 minutes presentation.
Thank you for having me in this program. In this talk, I'll deliberate on ontology, linguistic structures, worldview in relation to indigenous languages of a particular linguistic ecology, what we popularly call as Darjeeling Sikkim Himalayas. It's a part of the Eastern Himalayas, and it has a single linguistic ecology with shared history, culture, and demography. It is also a big micro-linguistic area within the South Asia. If you look into the indigenous people of Sikkim, they are autochthonous Lepchas. There is a fictitious kinship between three different communities, Bhutia, Lepchas, and Limbos, as well as we do find a large number of population belonging to Nepalis, belonging to Khas, Kirat, Dalit, as well as Mongol sects. In fact, it is a multi-ethnic, multi-linguistic area. So there are indigenous people in Sikkim? Yes, all are indigenous people in Sikkim. What is very good connection between indigenous people is about the language. If you look into the map of global hotspots of endangered languages, Sikkim and Darjeeling Himalaya is located in eastern India, where the languages are highly endangered. Similarly, if you take the similar concept and if you apply for the scripts, then this area is also a script hotspot where a large number of scripts are endangered. So Darjeeling and Sikkim Himalayas has a mosaic of linguistic diversity where there are more than 34 languages which are endangered in various degrees. State has 12 official languages other than Nepali, which is the 8th scheduled language. All other languages are endangered, and all other scripts other than Devanagari are endangered. Besides this, there are a large number of languages which have not been recorded. Hence, there is a situation of language denial in Sikkim too. Regarding the translation of indigenous text, when we think of translation to indigenous languages, first of all, the Bible comes into the picture. It is the most translated text in the indigenous languages, or there are major Indian literary languages or relevant work to particular specific genre, or Indian literature to English reading speakers. When I think of Indian literature, I mean the literature in Indian languages. But what we know mostly about indigenous translation or text taken from indigenous language is about the folklores. So what we have mostly observed or what we have found so far is that the content is being translated. There is a story and a story is being reproduced in another language. There is no bothering whether we should have a text in that language or in that script on one side, and so that we can safeguard these languages and script. Such kind of translation is not there. In fact, since these traditions of these indigenous communities are vanishing, these narratives have been recorded, documented, or translated. Now, if you look into the translation of oral narratives, where I am basically focusing, these oral narratives in these indigenous communities are at times performance. The story is being told at night, surrounded by children. They are recitals, or they are like opera, performed in certain institutions, or they are observed in certain rituals. Therefore, there are variations and versions also. And as we know that these stories, oral narratives, have connotative as well as denotative meanings, so the communication takes place. As we know that these communities have been studied by various authors, so we do find variations in this text also, even when it has been documented. And since we take this text and how the identities are created and related, these are both locally as well as globally, and sometimes translations become the real because the original is no longer available in the community. So translation in a sense is a rejuvenation also in these communities. Text, creator, community, culture are in the forefront. And there is a collaboration between the community and the translator. I'll come to this later on also. As a means to safeguard the indigenous languages, their rich literary heritage, as well as to project a worldview that they do have. At the same time, when we are translating text from the indigenous community, we are also, as a critic, we are looking for the equivalence in terms of lexical resources, metrical resources, phrasal, idiomatic, syntactic, cultural, and so many. But my focus will be on information structures, how we share, how we communicate, how old and new information are shared, how the ritual vocabulary is there. The ordinary word may not be there in part of these rituals. So how ritual vocabulary is preserved, which is not used every day. I'm basically pointing towards one of the documentations that we have done from the Kulum community. Here, my colleagues are there, Vishal Rai, Jyoti Sharma, and Reena Rai. Reena belongs to the Kulum community, which is one of the Rai community with the distinct linguistic and socio-cultural practices. So it was a part of this documentation where we have documented various institutions of the Kulum community. In the Kulum community, there are 7 days of mourning following the death, and there are several rituals. One of the rituals, which is in great Sinkurava, we have recorded it, translated it, and we tried to project in the way that we wanted it to be ethically good. Now, Sinkurava is the ritual of the deceased communicated and advised to join the ancestors. So this is how the community village. So this is the part of the performance which was taking place once in a family, and we took the permission to record it so that we can document it, as well as after the documentation we try to translate it. We provided how it has been pronounced in Rai, how it has been in Kulum, and then we provided English free translation as well as Nepali translation. At the same time, we have found some words which we kept it intact so that we can give the meaning in the bracket also. The person behind this documentation is my colleague, who is a documentation officer in the project, Vishal Rai. So he has come out with a documentary on Kulum's Antyestikriya. This is a tentative title and it's still in the post-production process. Now, if you look into this ontology, what I would try to say was that there is a cognitive orientation, values, ethics, how, and these are reflected in language, ultimately in literary text or in the oral text. So there are narratives essentially to capture this essence. So Lepchas are autochthonous people of Sikkim, and they called what we call the Kanchenjunga as Kinchinjomba, and they consider as sacred and as big brother, and considered as mountain as male, whereas lake is considered as female. Similarly, there is a love story between Tista and Rangit, what we call, but basically they call it Rongnu and Rongnit. It's like a Romeo and Juliet or Munamadan or Hir Raja. So Lepchas view Rongnu as female and Rongnit as male, and at the same time they big thunder, Somal as male, and small sounding thunder and lightning, so they are as female. This is from my colleague Rinjan's work. So this is how they see the mountain as well as thunder, lightning and rivers. So are we able to translate it through? So there are different information structures, how we provide this information. Since when we do this discourse is arranged in new and given information. So we would like to convey how it is being presented. Similarly, there are strategies how they can be done phonologically, morphologically or syntactically. So if you look into this single sentence in Nepali, it can be made, Nepali the same, the base sentence can be made into 5 different ways by changing the word order. And in English we can have it in 10 different ways to express the same. And there are basic strategies how to do it. Now, what is also basically important for us in a good translation is to use information packaging studies, because this is how discourse is being presented. How discourse takes place in the community is very important. At the same time, it is also important to portray the worldview. Are we able to portray the Tista and Romeo as male and female, as what the Lepchas conceive it, or the Kanchenjunga as the big brother and sacred in the text or in the target language? So the translation is not just about the content and the stories, but also about the worldview and how that worldview is expressed in a language through information strategies. At the same time, we need to evaluate whether the translated text that we have done has become something else or has remained the same as what is there in the original. So in other words, translation is a collaboration between a text world and the communities. I think we should not forget about communities and the world, because the world is what we are trying to visualize is the worldview. Otherwise, we will be just translating one text from another text without translating the world and how the community visualizes the world, its view, the worldview. Finally, the good translation for me is to promote better understanding between communities, to know about how other communities think about nature, about the surroundings. That's basically the worldview. And finally, as a linguist, I would like to say, translation is also an exploration of humankind, how human mind thinks, how human mind visualizes, and how human mind expresses what they do cognize. These are my references. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sinha. It was very interesting kind of points that you have brought in. And I think definitely people will have questions about understanding the oral traditions and how oral traditions are translating to text, and how it projects the worldview of the people. At the same time, how to take proper care of safeguarding the linguistic content and our cultural materials, and how they can be accessed by giving an idea about a particular culture through translation. Thank you for interesting points. The next presentation is by Roy Bonney. He is talking about, he's basically a Cherokee language film and media producer. In fact, is a Cherokee Nation citizen, artist, and language revitalization advocate. He worked with the Cherokee Nation as a language technologist, multimedia producer, and program manager for over 16 years. He now works as a Cherokee language film and media producer for Cherokee Film as a part of Cherokee Nation businesses. Over to you, Mr. Roy Bonney. It is very interesting.
Osio Nagad, Kani Kola Hadagwadoa. Hello, everyone. My name is Roy Boney Jr. Today I will be talking about Cherokee translation as a profession in media production. I am based in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, the capital city of the Cherokee Nation. I worked for the Cherokee Nation Language Revitalization Program for over 16 years. During my tenure there, I served as a program manager, which included managing translation for our tribal government programs and schools. Our translation team did software localization for companies such as Microsoft, Apple, and Google, as well as providing translation, subtitling, and language coaching for various media productions for the tribe and for external companies. With that experience under my belt, I recently took a new job position as a Cherokee language film and media producer for Cherokee Film. We are building upon our translation team's experience to develop opportunities in the film and TV industries. Let me begin with an overview of Cherokee Film. Cherokee Film is part of Cherokee Nation Business's cultural and economic development arm. The Cherokee Film ecosystem, through its 4 branches, Cherokee Film Productions, Cherokee Film Studios, Cherokee Film Commission, and Cherokee Film Institute, has a global reach and is a leader in changing the narrative surrounding Native Americans, offering state-of-the-art production facilities and an unrivaled passion to create positive change in the film and TV industry. Cherokee Film is helping cultivate the next generation of storytellers who will contribute to Cherokee Film's mission to create a better, more inclusive life for the next 7 generations. Our mission statement for Cherokee Film is to reclaim Cherokee and Native narratives by increasing media representation across film and media, while creating an ecosystem that supports production and drives economic activity in the Cherokee Nation. One of the ways we are doing that is through dubbing film and TV productions into Cherokee language. But exactly what do I mean when I say dubbing? With the explosion in streaming services and content, it is a common practice for studios to dub their properties into other languages for other markets. So dubbing is translating the original script, casting new voice actors, recording new dialogue, and syncing the new dialogue with the original video to ensure accuracy and synchronization. The new dialogue should fit seamlessly into the video, feel natural, and deliver an immersive experience for viewers in the target dub language. The key to successful dubbing is to keep intact the spirit of the original audio language. Creating traditional dubbing tracks requires extensive planning to create a quality result. In recent years, high-profile productions that feature indigenous communities in the United States have exploded. This has been because of the success of productions such as the FX series Reservation Dogs and Apple Films' Killers of the Flower Moon. Each of these productions were filmed in Oklahoma. They prominently featured Native stories and talent in front of and behind the camera. The Osage language was featured prominently in Killers of the Flower Moon as part of the original script. It was actually in the film and not dubbed. The production hired Osage language experts as consultants, actors, and dialogue coaches. The film Prey, part of the Predator franchise, featured a Comanche protagonist. A dubbed version of the film in Comanche was released to great acclaim on Hulu. The Marvel series Echo is set in the Choctaw Nation. The whole series was dubbed into the Choctaw language too. The first Avengers film was recently dubbed into the Lakota language. These are just a couple of examples of indigenous language dubbing productions. Each of these language communities form partnerships with studios to dub their language into modern, exciting, and popular properties to reach mass audiences in their languages. Cherokee Film has been producing original documentary content for several years. The Emmy-winning series OCO-TV, Voices of the Cherokee People, features segments spoken in Cherokee, including interviews, and there are even 3D animated language lessons. The team consists of film and television professionals who have a wide range of experience in all aspects of production, including state-of-the-art advances in XR soundstage production. Our translation team provides scripting, subtitles, and quality control on our original productions in Cherokee language. Leveraging the surge of interest in native language content, Cherokee Film has established a partnership with the Cherokee Nation Language Department to invest in studio spaces. This will allow our language community to dub existing properties into Cherokee language, as well as create original content in our language. Here you see a rendering of our new film studio expansion based in Owasso, Oklahoma. The ribbon cutting occurred on September 18th, 2024. These kinds of facilities are being built in consultation with Hollywood production studios. Our tribally owned production facilities will support real-world productions. It will help train local talent in voice acting, script translation, adaptation, dubbing, directing, producing, and quality control, among a few other skills. A team of Cherokee translators from the Cherokee Language Department and production crew from Cherokee Film have been actively working with a major Hollywood studio to dub a TV series into our language. But due to non-disclosure agreements, I am currently unable to name the studio or the production, but stay tuned for an announcement from Cherokee Nation this fall for the exciting details. Meanwhile, here are some photos showing some of our team in the studio training and dubbing. These kinds of projects have provided over 40 employment opportunities for people in our language community thus far. It has also led to some of them contracting jobs with other studios. It is definitely opening new career paths for our Cherokee language community. Here are just a handful of the kinds of positions now available in the field of dubbing for Cherokee and other indigenous languages. Translator. They translate a script into a target language, for example, Cherokee. An adapter. They adapt scripts to localize it to the target language while still retaining the spirit of the original script's intent. They make sure the content is culturally relevant and appropriate for the language community dub. The adapter also edits translations as needed to ensure the words match as near as possible the lip sync on screen of the original language. A dubbing producer. They help with the organization of schedules, contracts, translation deadlines, etc. The dubbing director. They direct voice acting talent while they are being recorded. They help ensure the performance in the target language is true to the original performers. The dubbing engineer. They work in tandem with the dubbing director to record the takes and help with syncing the recordings to the video content. A dubbing mixer. They mix the dub language content with the original music and effects to ensure the new target language integrates into the original video content as seamlessly as possible. And of course, the voice talent. They act and record all the lines in the language to be dubbed. All of these positions require knowledge of the language to ensure the language being presented accurate and culturally sound. Until our communities firmly establish ourselves in the mainstream media, we will always be up against popular media properties for our kids' attention from the likes of Disney, Warner Brothers, and other many famous production companies. Dubbing is one avenue which allows us to insert our language into familiar and beloved content. If our kids can watch one of their favorite movies in their mother language, we should make that option available to them. If our elders want to watch episodes of their favorite sitcom or old TV show, shouldn't that be an option? Of course it should. But that's not to discount creating our own original content in our languages either. We all have rich vaults of stories and storytellers in our tribal communities. Original content production is a very important avenue, but it does come with a higher point of entry cost. Dubbing helps us build our own tribal talent and prepare us for the day when we will be producing hours and hours of our own original content in our own language. This will be a boon for language revitalization and provide new career paths for our language community beyond the bounds of traditional classroom environments. For further information on Cherokee Film, visit our website, cherokee.film, and feel free to email me. My email address is seen on screen. Goyali@AGC. I'm grateful for your time. Pardon.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Roy Boni, because it is a very interesting kind of idea of how the script can get translated and dubbed into languages which are very closer in terms of translations. How in filmmaking this has an important role and how it reflects the community's perspectives and other things properly. Thank you for an interesting presentation. Now we have next presentation is it Devkumar? Because it's not there in the list.
Yes, Dev Kumar. We added this in the list.
Okay, okay. Dev Kumar is a chairperson of Indigenous Television, Nepal. He'll be speaking on ethical issues and translating Indigenous languages.
So, my name is Dev Kumar Sunwar. I'm from Nepal. I represent Sunwar indigenous peoples of Nepal. First of all, I would like to thank Translation Common for this opportunity to speak on the occasion of International Translation Day on the topic of ethical issues in translating indigenous languages. Nepal, no doubt, has many different languages which are spoken by diverse ethnic and caste groups. There are more than 142 different ethnic and caste groups speaking over 124 different languages, with 95 languages spoken by 60 officially recognized indigenous peoples of Nepal. Many of these indigenous languages, which are predominantly spoken, that means these are the oral language, but these languages actually carry a rich knowledge systems and cosmologies and identities that are not easily translatable into a written or the foreign linguistic structures. These languages are tightly interwoven with storytelling, rituals, and the social practices of indigenous peoples, and forming the foundation of this indigenous peoples' worldview. Translating these languages, particularly from the external or non-indigenous people's perspective, presents a challenge. There is a risk of distorting the cultural significance of the indigenous languages, which extend far beyond the technical matters. It also entails the potential misinterpretations of the indigenous knowledges. When the stories passed down orally from one generation to the another, and these stories, when these stories are translated or documented without their proper context, and more than this, there is also a risk of commodifications or the appropriations of this indigenous knowledge, indigenous data, or the indigenous stories too. So whenever I talk about the cultural appropriations, it means that the cultural appropriations that can occur when the researchers or any international, academia or international organizations, including governments, when they document or when they translate indigenous languages and their cultural knowledge without their consent or the consultations, what we call it, without their free, prior, and informed consent, or without providing any compensation of the communities. There have been instances too that where researchers or including tourists who have come to Nepal and have gone to the indigenous people's settlements and have used the indigenous symbols, their stories, or including their names without acknowledging their significance or without obtaining the permissions or without fulfilling their free, prior, and informed consent. And that actually has a kind of cultural erosions of indigenous peoples. For instance, whenever I travel to the capital city in Nepal, which is the touristic hub, or many cities which are touristic cities, there are instances that when the tourists or the including researchers, they have undertaken they have undertaken a kind of research projects or a research projects especially from outside of Nepal, and they have used the indigenous symbols or their stories or their names, as I said earlier, without understanding their meanings or without seeking any permissions. And these such activities actually can strip the languages of their original context, and that actually can erase the its cultural roots, what we call their cultural roots. Moreover, there also has been a kind of cultural performance of many different indigenous communities, and especially in the touristic cities, including in capital city like Sherpa, Tharu, Newar, and their dances actually are performed whenever you happen to come to Kathmandu or any part of the cities in Nepal. That their dances, their performance have been showcased in many hotels or in restaurants under or in the name of promoting tourism. However, the actual indigenous communities are often not involved in these performances, and often the hotels or restaurant that they generate any kinds of benefits, and these benefits are not being shared with the respective communities. Moreover, these kinds of performance without their involvement have often misrepresented. There have been misperformance of the indigenous people's dance or their cultural performances. and this actually has created a kind of detachment of their culture from their indigenous origin, because the indigenous people's dance performance, which are performed in hotels or in the restaurants, not rather than, and that actually has attracted the tourists or the researchers in the hotels or these or the restaurant rather than going to the field. And to address these kinds of issues, what I think there must be a kind of ethical sovereignty, what we call it. The ethical sovereignty is one of the important, which is essential, that can ensure that indigenous communities are central to this all the process of language documentations, even if we undertake any kinds of translations. The indigenous peoples or indigenous communities should be a part. They should take a central role in this. And we also need, there is a kind of ethical guideline that actually can guarantee the indigenous communities that they have control over how their languages are documented, they are used, or they are shared. And these guidelines should also address a kind of what I say is their concerns related to indigenous peoples' free, prior, and informed consent, their data protections, and including their intellectual properties. And what I also believe is before any documentation or before any translations, it is also essential to obtain the free, prior, and informed consent from the respective communities to ensure that their cultural sovereignty is respected and their knowledge is not misused. So therefore, any kinds of translations or documentations must respect the cultural context or the knowledge systems of indigenous peoples that are fundamental to their respective languages. Therefore, the translators also the researchers should collaborate closely with the respective indigenous community leaders and their language speakers to ensure that translations accurately reflect the communities or indigenous people's worldview. Finally, what I would like to say is there must be a kind of ethical and a legal framework that should be established to protect the indigenous knowledge, their data, including the development of intellectual property rights. Whenever we talk about the intellectual property rights of indigenous peoples, we basically talk about the collective ownership as the indigenous knowledge of indigenous communities, respective indigenous communities, is often considered as communal resources rather than individual resources or individual knowledge. Therefore, a kind of intellectual property rights, mostly a collective ownership right should be established. And similarly, the indigenous communities should retain the ownership of or ownership over their linguistic and cultural data, including how and where these data are translated, document, be stored or shared or used, whether that be in academia, governmental organizations, INGOs, or any other INGOs. That is what some of my thoughts regarding the ethical issues relating to the translation of indigenous languages. So with this, I would like to stop here. Thank you all for listening. So
Thank you, Devkumar Sonwa. It's a very interesting presentation where you raised issues of propriety and other aspects. And now we are moving on to another presentation by Mr. Evandro de Souza Bonfim. He's a professor of ethnology and anthropological linguistics from the Anthropology Department, National Museum, Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And he's making a presentation on the translation of legal documents to indigenous language in Brazil. Over to you, Mr. Evandro. 10 minutes.
And now I'm gonna floor to Altaci Rubin to present ourselves in their language. Please, Altaci.
Erepecuema, Tatirara Mitawara Wainotasi, Indira Kumitsa Kokama Tataia, Sawari Suri Tantantan de Sari Tamaquara, e com Quarati, Sa Yumitawara Sara Evandro Muki, Memuta, Bili, Brasil Quara. Yumitawara?
Altaci is speaking Tupi Guarani language from Brazil. We're gonna talk a little bit about the translation of official documents in current Brazil. I'm gonna ask Altaci to speak a little bit about the current situation of Brazil about the translation of legal documents. Please, Altaci.
Estamos vivendo no Brasil um momento importante para os povos indígenas, para a década das línguas indígenas, principalmente com a criação do Ministério dos Povos Indígenas, com o Departamento de Línguas e Memórias Indígenas e com a coordenação de políticas linguísticas para as línguas indígenas. E o aumento, principalmente, da cooficialização das línguas indígenas no Brasil. Esse aumento de cooficialização das línguas indígenas vai gerar a necessidade de tradução, de formação de tradutores, intérpretes e tradutores indígenas.
Thank you, Altaci. So Altaci is going to telling us that we have three situations in Brazil, very important. And we have the co-officialization of indigenous language in the cities and the states. We have a Ministry of Indigenous People and a Department of Languages, especially dedicated to languages. And we have the first translation of major documents as the Federal Constitution, Chunhengatu. So we have to point here some strategies that they are gonna use to translation those documents to indigenous languages, and we have to point a lacking of view, of cosmological view in those translations, and we are suggesting the use of a cosmopolitical vocabulary to incorporate a cosmopolitical vocabulary in this translation. So the translation strategies we have to identify, first one is replacing of the political terms for description or explanation. Two, a creation of an interlingua with key terms in Portuguese and functional elements in indigenous languages, but sometimes following patterns of sentences in Portuguese or even a usage not found in indigenous languages. So those translation, we have to say we must to slow down to see how we are translation documents to indigenous languages, because many terms, key terms, political terms in the colonial language is gonna to present in the documents. Regardless all the cosmopolitical view of the indigenous people. Each indigenous people has his own political conceptions, notions, how they interact. So we have to point out this lacking. Então, what is a cosmopolitical vocabulary? Cosmopolitical stands for an expanded view of social relationships, which for indigenous peoples includes humans, spirits, animals, forests, rivers, mountains, ancestors, territory, and cosmological concepts about them and how they interact. Então, we have a cosmopolitical view, a cosmopolitical vocabulary that it's not incorporated in those translations. Instead of that, we can see terms as country, nation, president, all the stuff, all the Western stuff in those documents. But we're gonna now point some examples of translations that use those notions, the cosmopolitical notions from the indigenous people. Those examples come from national anthems, Brazilian national anthems that was translated to many languages as ticuna. Joana Ticuna is an indigenous singer that sings Brazil national anthem in ticuna, and we have many interesting words translated to ticuna. And now I'm gonna say those examples. For example, the translator is an indigenous called Sansão Ticuna. Sansão Ticuna translated, for example, the flag and the mast of the flag, he translation for the fishing stick from the original hero from the Ticuna people, because Ticuna people is a people that they tell us they was fished from a igarapé, from a river. So what is the major axis for Ticuna's world? Is the fishing stick from the joy. So the Sansão Ticuna put this word in Ticuna to replace it, replace the flag, replace the mast of the flag for this symbol of his political view. So we're going to resume our presentation. We're gonna say the translations are going too fast, without time to translate or think about each cosmopolitical term from each people. We have to go into to get back to mythology, to storytelling, to how the social relations indigenous communities works, to think about this dialogue between those two words. Because if you only put Western concepts, indigenous translations, we're not gonna work that help indigenous people to understand and to occupy the government with a multilingual perspective. Thank you, Altaci. We thank you. Você pode agradecer, Altaci, para a gente? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You have kept to the time absolutely perfect. Thank you very much. Now, I think we are through. Yeah, the last of the presentations is Mr. Sergey Gladkov. He is head of R&D, Logos Global MQM Council. He's graduated with honors from Ivy League College, majoring in nuclear sciences. He has about 28 years of, in the localization industry, served as a localization manager and co-founded Logos Global, a language service and technology firm. He leads the company's AI lab, which released HL4 automatic metrics, and of course, he has given websites where these are there. Sergey is a member of the ASTEM MQM 2.0 research group, a member of MQM Council, has served 3 times on the DALA board, and is the US ANSA expert for ISO. Over to you, Sergey Gladkov, 10 minutes.
Greetings, everyone, and happy International Translators Day. I'm Sergey Gladkov, CEO and head of R&D at Logos Global. I have 30 years experience in the industry, including public and standards work, and we are also tools developer. Today, I'm honored and excited to talk on International Translators Day about how translation and localization tools are evolving in the new AI era, and especially how the capabilities of AI can be used in working with indigenous languages. I'm sorry for running this presentation and recording due to my other obligations. Unfortunately, cloning technology is not yet good enough. Here's the short plan of what I'm going to talk today about. My goal today is to give a brief overview of how GenAI is different from previous generation of MT technologies, point out important facts and examples about GenAI, and give useful recommendations on how to use it for indigenous languages. I'll be speaking fast because I only have 10 minutes. We're witnessing nowadays a significant shift in the landscape of globalization. Previously driven by large multinational corporations, globalization is now pushed forward by global economic growth itself. Emerging markets are growing 3 times faster than the global average, which increases the importance of languages and regions. And also humanity is becoming more human. That's why UNESCO has declared the decade from 2022 to 2032 as the decade of indigenous languages, highlighting the growing significance of the long-tail languages, all languages of the world. In 2017-2019, MT technology made a leap into transformers, which allowed MT to generate much better translations than before. Statistical MT required intense lexical and grammatical editing, but neural MT with transformers demonstrated quite fluent output and overall much better literal translation. The technology allowed relatively easy trained with MT and terminology, but with TM and terminology, but required extensive maintenance and training, especially for many languages. But why I'm talking about this today? Because despite all the miracles of GenAI, traditional neural MT is faster, more robust, and in many cases is more suitable. Traditional neural MT remains to be a mainstream tool for globalization companies for industrial translation process. But in 2022, GenAI has emerged as a new class of tools. It took the world by storm just in 3 years from zero to here. And here's what GenAI is as new class of technologies undoubtedly is. It is a vast corpus of textualized knowledge. It is an excellent retrieval mechanism with highly fluent and relevant output, and a supervised learning, polished ability to provide relevant answers that humans appreciate. This new class of tools did not exist before, just that there were no spreadsheets and databases prior to the computer era. Its capabilities are nothing short of amazing. Despite AI-generated content being only about 80% accurate at most, think about it, it's incredibly useful for tasks like these 10 tasks, which are carefully distilled for you as the real best productivity drivers for individuals and individual professionals. With GenAI, you can learn the basics about new topics, with chatbot acting as interactive tutor. You can simplify complex concepts and code. You can automate intricate procedures with scripts, become a power user. You can serve as a basic API and feature reference, quickly replace search engine queries on basic issues, finding information that is difficult to locate with the search engine, search by example for things that are hard to describe, write simple programs to accomplish one-off tasks more efficiently and is not crucial, solve tasks with known solutions, fix common errors, and of course, you can do translation. Translation is an initially unexpected area where AI has already demonstrated excellent results. Unlike previous generation of machine translation, which were designed specifically for translation tasks, GenAI was not built for that and offers translation as additional benefit. GenAI translation is more fluent, but its output is less predictable, requires more verification. Comes another benefits for that, and GenAI supports many languages on a good baseline, makes it a valuable tool in translation despite its variability. It is important to understand both advantages and benefits and limitations of GenAI. Fluency is achieved by increasing the value of temperature, such an enigmatic parameter, which also increases hallucination and error rate. GenAI would rarely confess that it doesn't know something. In absence of true answer, fake answer is hallucinated. GenAI has to be tested to determine capability to translate into specific languages. Recent models are, of course, multilingual, but size of training corpus varies, and some languages severely lack data, which makes GenAI to hallucinate. In this slide, you can see that despite all the miracles and wonders of GenAI, we must maintain critical approach to be able to learn and master this new class of tools. These are two screenshots from a very deep, excellent work on LLM challenges, which is a little bit deep, but it's in-depth research, very interesting, of what's not really working very well. I recommend this article, but want now to point out to the fact which is comes clear if you come to think of it, which is a lack of data for long-tail languages. They here in this slide, you see that, of course, the most abundant data is in English, and then are coming Russian, Spanish, Turkish, and Persian on the internet, French, German, Japanese, and all the others really decline very fast. So for long tail, we have insufficient data. And of course, large language models learn universal grammar, but even if you are very, very skillful in learning languages, you still need vocabulary. So vocabulary is missing, and where is missing, we have not really good examples. Like here, for example, you see the ChatGPT 4.0, which is, by the way, the most advanced multilingual model, cutting edge, insists that the word means bird, then insists that it indeed means cloud, then agrees that it means blue, and then eventually invoking the chain of thought, which doesn't involve any thinking, it gives you a completely incorrect translation. The same thing about Cherokee. It gives you correct name of the language, but Bobcat is translated incorrectly. And as soon as we come to the sources of dictionaries and vocabularies, we can see that's Cherokee Language Consortium vocabulary, and both the book, Cherokee Words with Pictures, gives you the true translation of the Bobcat, which is different from what ChatGPT gave you. And of course, we understand that by those two examples, that linguistic sources and language knowledge are especially important when we use GenAI for indigenous languages. The same thing about other long-tail languages like Wenda, which is a South African language, completely different meaning from two different technologies here. So translators are very important. And also, what is now very important is the ability to correctly measure translation quality, which is achieved by mastering so-called multilingual quality metrics, which is now in its 2.0 incarnation, championed by people from MCAM Consortium, who has been starting this many years ago as a European QD Launchpad project, and now the model has been significantly updated, as well as the typology and the scoring model. All of this is published on the mqm.org website, and there's a paper on archive, which is a very good reading, and there's also Substack, which you can learn. So it's a really important instrument in today's modern world, where we have both art and science and production of language coming together, and for all of them, the measurement is of the quality, translation quality, is very, very important. So by that time, you should agree with me that, of course, the GenAI is not a silver bullet. It's an addition to the already extensive landscape of tools And this new class of tools comes to already very much sophisticated landscape. Previously, we can a couple of years ago, 4 years ago, we ran a project in Gala Standardization Group, which where I have created a document which created a list of elementary task types. There are only 5 of them, but now we have 8 because in addition to traditional task types, we have AI flavored task types like AI translation with context, AI editing, and AI QA. And those 8 types can be combined in any way you want, depending on the task you have. And now much more sophisticated workflows are possible. So it's not just that AI came and replaced everything. On the contrary, it's augmentation that requires you to use more tools, to learn and know more about languages and translation, and you have to do all of this in addition to what you have. You now have to learn what AI is for you. And of course, the traditional tools will be augmented by AI capabilities. Here's the screenshot from our own CAT tool, where in addition to traditional approach, you have a menu with several AI-specific commands, which allows you to invoke group editing, AI proofreading, AI editing, and now this is already obsolete because we also have AI evaluation. And this is another short list for you, in addition to the previous one. This is more specific to translation, to indigenous languages. You can learn the basics about indigenous languages with GenAI, using chatbot as interactive tutor of the language. You, of course, have to verify GenAI output related to indigenous language. You can simplify concepts and retrieve hard-to-find facts about indigenous languages. Translate but verify, and add your style and vocabulary, and always verify GenAI output related to indigenous language. You can use GenAI for review and fixing common errors, but with critical approach to the output. Always verify GenAI output related to indigenous language. Use as a search engine, query on the indigenous language facts, find information that is difficult to locate with the search engine, search by example for things that are hard to describe, but always verify GenAI output related to indigenous language. And try different models. Here are the models that I use most often every day. They come from OpenAI and Claude and Perplexity. Those 5 models are all different, have their own advantages and features, have their own style, if you want, have their own prompting, which is not compatible, by the way, and very varying quality for various language pairs. So this is really the enrichment of what we had before in terms of the tool set and knowledge, huge productivity boost, and at the same time, things that we didn't have before. They make things more interesting, albeit more complicated. Thank you very much. You're welcome to email your questions, and I will be happy to respond. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Gay. It's a interesting kind of this thing, how even technology can be problematic in using unless we take a lot of measures. And now I think we can have, because we have overshot a little bit of time, maybe we can have questions by 2-3 questions. I think one, they are there in the chat box. Some of you, I think Dr. Sinha, there is a question for you. What will be the authentic judgment of translation into artificial intelligence? Can you briefly answer if you are there?
Thank you, Prasad.
Yeah.
I really don't know what might be a very good answer, but I really think that a text which will be approved by the community might be a good measure to take count whether that we should take it as a good translation or not. Because many a times the community may not approve the translation because the things are not in the way that maybe there is a wrong choice of words, it doesn't convey the same thing, or it has been exaggerated, or certain facts have been hidden while in translation. I really don't know exactly what might be a very good measure, but I think this rule of thumb is a good way to go. As we make progress, I think we can know better what can be tangible measures to know about it. I think that's what I can say at the moment.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. It is quite good because there is no other way than that right now. Now the next, there's a question for Mr. Evandro de Souza, born from. It is, of course, the IP rights of indigenous communities to their languages and data are relevant, very relevant in view of current global efforts to regulate AI companies. I think it's a comment rather than a question. It's of course, they trying to say that a fishing stick is being used for flag is a good sign. I think it's a comment, appreciation of that. And I think Mr. Evandros, that is, I think same, isn't it? It's the same one, repeated. I think Mr. Sergey's, this thing is, with the cyborgs, we are benefited. Besides all bewildering, how can we claim the privilege and justice to a translator when challenged by the intervention of artificial human, that is AI? Please look at this. I think Dr. Sue Ellen might answer if it is. If she's there.
Yeah, I'm looking at the question. The problem is that it's not a simple answer. As Sergey kept saying, you have to verify. And that is the most important thing. The translator still needs to be in the loop. With AI, we may be able to increase our efficiency. We may even increase some of the fluency of the work that we do. But we constantly have to be on the outlook for not just hallucinations, but for false statements that result from putting sentences in the wrong order. We all know that in different languages, we manipulate the position of information in the translation. And that's hard for AI to do because it doesn't understand those nuances. And the big problem is to convince customers and clients that the translator is still necessary because they're becoming convinced, oh, we don't need you, we have this. And they don't take into account the risks and the dangers involved.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a very clear, and I think whoever asked that question definitely will be convinced. I think if there are any questions later, they can be addressed directly to the authors or to the presenters so that they could even answer them. I think because of the time shortage, I just would like to close this particular session. And it's a very interesting kind of presentations that we had, basically how translations and interpretations play an important role in reflecting the cultural and linguistic materials and their access to that, and what kind of problems involved, what kind of ethical and other issues are involved are very well discussed. Thank you for all the panelists, and I must thank Translation Commons for this opportunity, specifically Ms. Jeanette for this opportunity. Thank you all. Wonderful session. Thank you. Thank you all to you, Jeanette.
Yes, thank you so much, Siva, and all the presenters. This has been an amazing session. We would like to continue with our next session, which is moderated by Dr. Hanem El Farahati, Associate Professor of Arabic Language, Translation and Interpreting at the University of Leeds in the UK. Hanem?
Yes, thank you, Jeanette. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to you all for the second part of this session on translation and interpretation, ensuring cultural and linguistic access. In this session, we will focus on three critical areas of training, regulation, and education, which are fundamental to ensuring equitable communication across diverse cultures and languages. Training, as you know, equips the translators and interpreters with the skills necessary communication gaps while addressing cultural nuances. Regulation, on the other hand, establishes quality standards, and without proper regulation, speakers of these languages may face barriers to accessing healthcare, legal services, education, and other fundamental areas of society. And finally, education promotes public awareness of language rights and supports the preservation of endangered languages, while also addressing the challenges of this rapidly changing digital world, as we have been hearing on this platform. Also, maintaining linguistic diversity requires innovative approaches to ensuring that languages, especially endangered ones, thrive in this digital space. I am personally excited to hear from our distinguished speakers who will share with us their insights and expertise. As you know, just a reminder, everyone, we have 10 minutes, and then we will have questions at the end. So please feel free to submit your questions throughout the session. Our first speaker today is Dr. Tariq Khan, who has a PhD in applied linguistics from the University of Hyderabad. He currently works as the officer in charge of the National Translation Mission at the Central Institute of Indian Languages, Mysore, India. Dr. Khan is the editor of Translation Today journal. He will be speaking to us today on the translation and creation of knowledge and society. The floor is yours, Dr. Khan.
Thank you, Hannah. Hello and namaskar from India. My name is Tariq Khan, and I wish to begin by thanking Janet, Translation Commons, and UNESCO for organizing this program and also for giving me an opportunity to share some thoughts with you. I feel honored to be present on this incredible platform. In this presentation, I wish to focus on the role of translation in the education sector. I would like to emphasize on how translation has been instrumental in knowledge transfer, both synchronically and diachronically. As new technologies create new necessities, AI-based machine translation systems have started impacting the scenario of knowledge texts also. Consequently, validation and proofing services have emerged strongly in machine-aided translation activities. The education sector is among the greatest beneficiaries of this emerging trend that may contribute to equitable educational settings. In the process, translation is also likely to contribute to the creation and sustenance of knowledge society. A knowledge society treats knowledge as a humanizing force, and it aims at making the world a better place to live. Let us understand these matters briefly with some observations. Number one, an important basis of all our knowledge is translation, whether received across generations or across regions. Number two, the classrooms across the globe do not present a good picture due to the lack of equal learning opportunities. And one of the sources of inequalities is the language barrier that can be removed through translation of educational materials. And number three, the creation of a knowledge society is important for human beings, and translation can play an incredible role in it. Therefore, it is important to translate knowledge texts into the languages that learners speak. The term knowledge text may refer to academic content such as textbooks, research articles, classics, and several other useful pedagogical materials. One may be interested to ask, why do translation of knowledge texts and creation of a knowledge society matter? My very intuitive answer to this would be, education can simplify world problems and improve the quality of life, but it should be available in the languages people speak. Number two, it can create and transform the existing world order and make it more sustainable, but it should be available in the languages people speak. Education in mother tongues can create equality among learners who face disadvantage due to the medium of instruction, and translation can help. My experiences and observations are from my country, that is India, and I consider it relevant to mention a couple of initiatives of the government of India that are likely to contribute to the creation of a knowledge society. The first one I would like to mention is the scheme with which I am associated, that is the National Translation Mission. Its contributory role merits a mention here. It is important to note that NTM here refers to National Translation Mission. It has set the benchmarks for translation of knowledge texts and academic content in 22 Indian languages. NTM has been translating and publishing textbooks of higher education in 22 languages of India, and it offers training to translators and professional translators, emerging and professional translators. The second one is a recent development that I would like to share with you, that is called Asmita Project. It's an acronym that refers to augmenting study materials in Indian languages through translation and creative writing. As a very large-scale initiative of the Government of India, the Asmita Project aims at creating 22,000 academic textbooks in Indian languages. Initially, the languages in priority include Bengali, Gujarati, Hindi, Kannada, Malayalam, Marathi, Odia, Punjabi, Sanskrit, Tamil, Telugu, and Urdu. The other languages of the 8th schedule of the Constitution of India may be considered at a later stage. The availability of scripts plays a role for languages to be included and excluded in the list. So there are several interesting developments taking place, but they all face challenges, and the issues faced by these translation initiatives are as follows. Number one, terminological issues. In a linguistically diverse country like India, there are languages that have a tradition of reading and writing, and technical terms may be available. But there are also languages which are traditionally spoken, but teaching learning has not happened in them. Therefore, the absence of technical terms in them or translation equivalents for subject-related terms is creating a hurdle. And then that necessitates coining of new terms, that necessitates creation of glossaries, that also demands creation of banks of technical terms, and this has emerged as a big challenge for both these initiatives. Number two, the script issue. We are faced with very interesting script issues. We in India do not only have linguistic diversity, our diversity in terms of scripts is also very interesting and notable. We have languages that do not have scripts. We have languages that are written in multiple scripts, and we have languages that are not aligned to the latest developments, latest technological developments. So the languages that do not have scripts face difficulties because even if there are attempts to translate, translation can happen for written and printed material. So script poses a challenge. Then there are languages like Sindhi or Konkani or Santali, which are written in multiple scripts. And the availability of multiple scripts poses a bigger challenge because the script in which the teaching learning materials should be available becomes a problem. The third problem, which is slightly invisible, is the issue of copyright, translation rights, and credit to the translators. Very often we have noticed that publishers are disinclined to share copyrights or translation rights or publication rights with translators, and their fear is they fear a loss of revenue, and their fear is well placed. So there is a need to instill faith in them and assure them that their revenue loss cannot happen, or it will be taken care of, or they will be incentivized for sharing the translation rights. We look at machine translation systems and AI-based new developments which have emerged as biggest disruptors in current times. There is an exponential rise in the quantum of translated text. However, the translation of a book has to be a book. And also, so far, validation is not done by machines. That is also required to be done by humans. So this development has tilted the advantage towards major languages in which scripts were available, or that in which teaching learning was happening traditionally. But there is a need to create this to minimize this minimize this divide. And also there is a need to understand that validation of machine translated text will be done by humans only. The fifth point I want to mention here as an issue is compensation to the people involved. What we notice very sadly is translators, authors, reviewers, publishers, data entry operators, copy editors, all of them are part of what we know as translated copy of a source text. But there are the people who are involved in the background are very disadvantaged. They do not receive appropriate compensation for the work they put in, and their efforts are often ignored. There are very less frequent revisions to the compensation they get. So there is a need to understand the kind of service they are providing and also compensate them appropriately. For languages which are not traditionally used, or scripts which are not traditionally used for reading and writing, for such scripts, there is a dearth of quality proofreaders, there is a dearth of data entry operators, and the cost of production also goes high. Then there's a need for capacity building also. There's a need for skill development, because these are issues which are very important to note. The translation of a textbook has to be a textbook. A book should come out as in translation as a book only. So therefore, there is a need to train the translators to stick to the format and also maintain the quality in such a way that no compromise has happened in the content, because that can have a very disastrous effect. So those translators who are involved in knowledge text translation need special training, and just anyone and everyone cannot become part of translation activity, especially if it involves pedagogical materials. Now, if you look at the recent developments inspired by the digital turn, the present decade can be termed the decade of post-editing and validation. However, this has also necessitated the participation of a very large number of language professionals in translation quality assurance tasks. In view of new developments and policies being adopted by different governments, the access to knowledge content appears to be increasing fast, and we are certainly getting closer to the creation of knowledge society. On this important occasion of International Translation Day, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity, and I am happy that I could share some thoughts with you. I would be happy to receive your questions. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khan. That was really interesting to learn from you a little bit more about the Indian unique context of linguistic diversity and all the challenges, the advantages of this, of course, that we are proud of, but at the same time, what many challenges the linguistic diversity brings to us, and the ability to overcome them with the ever-changing digital sphere that we are experiencing nowadays. Thank you so much. Our second speakers actually today, we have two speakers in this presentation, is Miss Patri Munoz Andres, and excuse me if I say your name not in the proper way, just correct me please. And Mr. Thank you. And Mr. Juan Cruz Vera Ocampo. First of all, Ms. Andres is the director of the Translation and Localization Department at Linguava in Spain. She is also the company's lead implementer of ISO standards. Mr. Juan Cruz is the project manager at Linguava in Argentina, where he leads the orchestration of translation projects, vendor integration, and quality assurance. Both presenters will be talking to us today on the lack of regulatory institution, showcase as a case study. The floor to yours. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here today. I'm Patri Munoz Andres, Director of Translation and Localization at Linguava. We are a language service provider that specializes in healthcare and serves hospitals with responsive language services in an aim to improve patient experience and health outcomes. And a little bit about myself, I have a special passion for quality assurance. It is indeed the main topic for my PhD thesis, nearly finished PhD thesis. And I've been in the industry for a little bit over 10 years. Around the last 5 have been in healthcare. And I'm here today with Juan Cruz Ocampo, and I'm gonna let him introduce himself.
Thank you, Patri. My name is Juan Cruz Ocampo. I'm a localization project manager, also at Linguava. I'm a huge fan of indigenous languages, and I've also loved doing the investigation for the Chuukese, a case study, which we're going to present. So let's get started.
Perfect. Okay, so why doing a case study on Chuukese? Well, as I mentioned, we are an LSP. We happen to be located in Oregon. So we get a big influx of requests for this language. We noticed that it is spoken by a little bit over 51,000 people, according to the year 2000 census. However, due to the lack of consensus between its variations, its accessibility is potentially endangered.
So what is the purpose of this? And first, we would like to raise awareness on the need for a consensus among the different varieties to avoid endangering the accessibility of the language. Also, because we would like to better serve our community in Oregon and to live up to one of our core values, which is servant's heart and giving back to the community what belongs to the community. And finally, this is also a call to action for regulatory institutions and the community itself. So here in this slide, what we can see is a map of the Pacific. We can observe the Marshall Islands, we can observe the Federated States of Micronesia, as well as Palau. And right there in the middle, you'll see, basically you'll see that all of this, it's a group of islands and atolls. And right there in the middle, we have the state of Chuuk. And in the right, which we are specializing, we have the 5 official languages by the Chuuk state, which are Chuukese, Mortloquese, Namonoito, Pafang, and Puluwatese, which 4 of them, as you can see marked in yellow and in red, are considered as definitely or severely endangered languages of extinction, according to the UNESCO Atlas. And this is very important because even though these are 5 languages, there are slight differences which can be like the Chuuk continuum between all of these. And it's important to embrace all of them and be more specific on Chuukese. So we're going to move to the next slide. What is Chuukese spoken? First, it's obviously in the Chuuk state, where the vast majority is there, but we can also find it in the Pohnpei state and also in different states of US territory. So as we can see in the table below, we can see that they are located in Hawaii, they're based also in Washington, in Arkansas, in Oregon, in California, and finally, which is pretty close to the Federated States of Micronesia, they are also located in the state of Guam, which is an island. And okay, we're going to speak a little bit more about the case study. Patri, all yours.
Thank you, Juan. So how did this all start, right? As most of the times, right, with the request for a translation into Chuukese, in this case for Northern Namibia Island. Upon delivery of the translation, our client informed us that the Chuukese community in Oregon identified the language as Pohnpeian and not Chuukese at all. As you can imagine, it came as a shocker, and we conducted a rather intricate and time-consuming investigation upon this. And we came up with the following highlights. First, as you know, normally when you get when a client gives you feedback on the translation, the first thing you do is asking for further specific feedback on where are the instances, what are the words, the structures that actually, in this case, caused the community to believe it was a different language. And unfortunately, we didn't get back a clear answer. So that was our first red flag. Second, we sent this over back to different teams. And even though our teams were able to confirm it was Chuukese indeed, we noticed that as a company that really focuses on quality assurance, we usually require multiple written sources for the justification back to the client, right? To say, just like the Royal Academy of Language for Spanish, you cite it and you say, here's what it says, right? Same thing. And we expected many more resources than we actually got back during this. So even though we know that Chuukese is a widely understood language, despite of its locale, there was a community that did not feel identified with the translation. So therefore, we concluded that there is an evident lack of agreement among the Chuukese community, even on what variations there are, how they are written, and obviously of regulation of the language itself.
Okay, so adding a little bit more of conclusions here, we can also say that even though the percentage of state population is low in all these US territories we have mentioned before, we are talking about one of the communities with a greater need for language access in the Pacific coast. And adding to this, and despite the fact that Chuukese itself is not endangered to extinct, as Patri mentioned, it's spoken by around 50,000 people, its accessibility is compromised. And this endangers their access to healthcare, education, and many more. And our third conclusion comes with migration and localization for this vulnerable language being jeopardized if it's not standardized. As we have mentioned, Chuukese is being spoken in Chuuk, in Pohnpei, in Guam, in Hawaii, and the increasing trend of outmigration into the US makes them come from different origins and creating new locales all the time. So this creates a need for standardization and more accessibility.
And adding to what Juan just said, again, all of the Pacific Island communities, but especially Chuukese, right, have a need for that integration and that inclusion. And we strongly believe, and we wanted to highlight that we think that this can be achieved through the translation of more written documentation, right? We also noticed that there's a high demand of qualified linguists for Chuukese. Right? One of the constraints that we faced was the lack of specialized linguists on this language. And last but not least, there's an obvious need for further study and regulation on the Chuukese language and its variations, as we have stressed all throughout our presentation. Again, this is our call for action to those regulatory institutions and the community itself, right, to come together. And we believe that this quote summarizes this very well, this giving back to the community that we would like to do at Linguava. Translation is not a matter of words only. It is a matter of making intelligible a whole culture. So thank you so much. We would love to answer any questions that you might have. And thanks again for having us here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Andres and Mr. Cruz. That was really interesting. I like it that you have been acting as a strong voice of this community. It's not about how many the population is, it's about what you just exactly touched upon: access, accessibility, inclusion, which are the concepts in the heart of an inclusive society. And I'm really proud that you are doing this research and calling upon other researchers to take the lead on this as well, but also call about authorities to do something which something we really need. Thank you so much. Questions will be at the end, so I'll let you know if there are any questions. in the chat. Thank you. Now our next speaker is Mr. Abdulaziz Al-Dhuhayyan, who is an interpreter trainer at the Faculty of Translation, Kent State University in Saudi Arabia. He is an adjunct faculty of translation with over 2 decades of experience in the language industry. Mr. Al-Dhuhayyan will be presenting on language neutral interpreter training. The floor to you, Mr. Al-Dhuhayyan.
Thank you, Hanem. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'd like to share some thoughts on a key development in interpreter training, language neutral interpreter training. This approach shifts the focus from training interpreters based on specific language pairs to developing core interpreting skills that transcend languages. My goal is to explain how this model arose from the evolving field of translation studies, how it benefits interpreters, and how it promotes equality, particularly for linguistic minorities. Over time, translation studies evolved from a narrow focus on linguistics, which emphasize, amongst others, syntax and semantics, to an interdisciplinary field. Today, translation and interpreting are seen as activities that require not just language proficiency, but a blend of cognitive, cultural, and communicative skills. This shift paved the way for language neutral interpreter training, where the focus is on mastering the processes and techniques of interpreting rather than learning how to work within specific language pairs. Language neutral interpreter training is an approach where interpreters are trained in universal skills applicable across any language pair. Rather than focusing on language-specific nuances, interpreters develop core competencies essential to all forms of interpreting. These key skills include, but are not limited to, attention splitting, meaning the ability to listen and process, speak simultaneously during interpretation. There is shadowing as well, the shadowing skill, which is repeating what is being said in the source language. Very helpful, by the way. And focused listening, interpreting what is said while understanding the deeper meaning and intent behind the words. There's also cognitive load control, which is managing mental effort and stress to maintain clarity and precision during extended interpreting skills. And finally, last but not least, delivery protocol, structuring speech for clarity, tone, and pacing to ensure the message is delivered effectively. These skills are universal, meaning that they can be applied regardless of the specific languages involved. One of the most significant elements of this model is the role of the interpreter trainer. In traditional models, trainers often specialized in particular language pairs. However, the language neutral approach positions the trainer as a facilitator of core interpreting techniques. They teach interpreters to manage cognitive challenges, master the techniques like note-taking and attention splitting, and deliver messages clearly and confidently, skills that transcend language. This allows for more flexibility in the training process and ensures that trainers can focus on the mechanics of interpreting, preparing interpreters for any linguistic context. A critical benefit of language neutral interpreter training is its role in promoting equality within the interpreting profession. Traditional training programs often placed more emphasis on interpreters working with dominant languages, leaving those who worked with minority languages with fewer resources and opportunities. In contrast, Language neutral training ensures that interpreters from all linguistic backgrounds, including linguistic minorities, receive the same high quality education. The focus on universal skills means that interpreters working with underrepresented languages are not sidelined or under-trained, thus contributing to a more equitable profession. This model helps bridge the gap between dominant languages and minority languages, ensuring that interpreters of all backgrounds have equal access to the same level of training and can compete in the same professional spaces. Let me summarize the main advantages of this approach. Scalability and flexibility. Trainers focus on teaching universal techniques, making it possible to train interpreters regardless of the language pair they are working with. Equality. All interpreters, including those working with linguistic minorities, have access, including also the clients, access to the same level of training, helping to close the gap between major and minor languages. Adaptability. Interpreters gain skills like attention splitting and cognitive load control, which can be applied to any interpreting scenario, making them more adaptable in a multilingual environment. In conclusion, language neutral interpreter training is a forward-thinking approach that reflects the realities of today's interpreting profession in a globalized world. By focusing on universal skills, we ensure that interpreters are well equipped to perform in any context, while also promoting equality by providing the same level of training for all interpreters, regardless of the languages they work with. This model not only benefits interpreters, but also ensures that linguistic minorities are given the opportunity to excel in the field. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Abdulaziz. That was really interesting to hear your explanation of how neutral interpreting as an approach can be yet again another tool of inclusion and accessibility. And I'll be interested to see how this could be applicable in practice, because as you know, interpreting and the human element of it, and now coming to digital world and AI and all this sort of challenges already in place. So to be honest, I would like to chat more again in the question time about how this could be applicable, which is something we all need. Thank you so much.
Anytime, Doctor.
Yeah, thank you. Now to our last speaker in this session, Mr. Waltz Ornschreich. I'm sorry if I say it wrong. I practiced it a lot, but I'll try again. So Mr. Waltz Ornschreich is the director of the University of Latvia, Livonian Institute. He is a language activist for Latvia Indigenous Slovenian language. He has been involved with many activities, both physical and digital, focused on safeguarding and empowering Livonian language and heritage for over 30 years, also serving as a mediator between NGOs, governmental institutions, and academia. He will be talking to us today on the path to the resilience and sustainability in the digital world, Livonian. So the floor is yours, Mr.
Hello, my name is Waltz Ornschreich. I am director of the University of Latvia Livonian Institute and also a co-chair for ad hoc group on digital equality.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but we can't hear you very well, Waltz.
Of the International Decade of Indigenous Languages.
Waltz, sorry to interrupt you. It's a video, is it? Oh, right. Oh, okay, but it's a bit low. Sorry. Okay.
In my talk, I would like to highlight some key takeaways that come from our decades-long work on bringing Latvia's indigenous Livonian language into digital space. So Livonian is kind of a community that represents the future of many indigenous endangered communities. It's small. The community itself is like 1,000–2,000 people. We have less than 20 fluent speakers left. It's exterritorial, it's scattered. The majority of the community has lost the language over the time, and it is extremely low on resources. So the digital world in Livonian case, as it could be for many indigenous languages, is an answer of and something that might serve as a prosthetics for what has been lost over the time, such as area, common space, so access to the language sources, support during the language acquisition. So here are some key elements from that we find very beneficial if addressed when trying to establish digital, bringing indigenous languages into digital world as come from the Livonian perspective. So digital equality and being able to enter and live in the digital domains starts actually from small things. So this is not about technology, because technology is always evolving, technology changes, and there are many, many options coming up every day, but it is, the basics of it is ability to produce data. So that is a precondition of any kind of documentation. So this ability is determined whether you are able to write in your language or use your language in any of digital domains. Such small things as a keyboard drivers, having symbols on your computer are all very important, but also very important are also standardization issues and also inclusive standardization that allows variety of the language to flourish and be retained. Everyone should be involved, and that's the second point, because a resource of the community itself cannot and should not be underestimated by academia or those developing our technologies. So, and not only as a source of documentation, but also as a magnificent force to build digital resources and instruments. So here at Livonian Institute, we have a program of Livonian speaker involvement in our everyday business, and it means that they are taking part of transcribing text, annotating corpora, providing voice examples to the dictionaries. And what it brings, it brings something to us, to the academia, for people who do the research and develop technologies. But on the other hand, it also provides them with ability to spend their days and their time within the language environment, and thus keep the language running and well. Another aspect which is very important is picking the right technology. So there are plenty of technologies out there for different purposes. Some of the technologies are resource consuming and also data requiring. So many technologies out there are kind of nice to have, but might have no real effect on the sustainability of the language, or be even damaging for the language domains and not viable to build. For example, OCR. So this is a cool tech, but for Livonian, where the majority of documentation in written form has been done by different people in handwriting, it was very poor quality, so it would be very resource consuming to build OCR with little to no effect, and that actually work could be done manually, actually much faster and much more efficient. Machine translation is another example. So in Livonian case, we have experimented with building machine translation for the Livonian language, and our takeaway was that we were not able, because of the lack of data, we were not able to build a machine translation that will properly work for producing Livonian texts. And it's actually highly questionable whether we would need something like that does not actually provide any good Livonian. However, what is very important, a crucial technology for Livonian is that because of the majority of community is not proficient anymore in Livonian language, so we do need technology that provides access for those who are not proficient to the Livonian texts that are documented. So, and this is where the machine translation would actually be much more beneficial, providing translations from the Livonian to other languages, like, for example, Latvian spoken by the community, so that people could get access to the Livonian content and Livonian texts. Another key element and key aspect is that there should be responsibility of everyone involved in research and development of the language environment in the digital space, so both academia and those developing technology. So there is a lot of professional interests connected with the indigenous languages, but it should not be forgotten that particular community and language has to benefit from that work. So while research and building texts, there also always should be this question asked, like how and in what way this tech will be accessible by the community, and whether the community is consulted at all when building such technology. So, and sometimes it really takes like very small steps to do. Like there's a recent example on Livonian that Google has published a keyboard driver for Livonian language for Android phones, and none of the community has been consulted about like what it has to contain. So basically, there is tech out there done for Livonians, but cannot be used by Livonians because Livonians used a little bit different requirements for writing in the language. So another example from the Livonian perspective is. A little bit back in history, so in 1930s there was a book published, a dictionary published in phonetical transcription with the German correspondences, and that could not be used by Livonian community because Livonians don't speak German, neither are they proficient in phonetical transcriptions. So it was until 50 years later when the first usable dictionary was published. That 50 years was actually, it could be filled up with very simple means, but that's another thing that to remember, the strong responsibility aspect. So it is also important to remember that when the technology is published, that it is not being harmful for the speakers of the language. For example, if there is a poorly executed translation, so it might create, because of the ability to produce text, it might create digital pollution and basically kill all the digital domains of the language and language as such. So that is the same can be said about chatbots, for example, and other that kind of technologies that are they have a great capacity of producing data instead of the community. And for the final aspect, it is very important, and this is what we find from our work, is that it's very important to chase dreams and not fantasies. So there's a thin gray line between those two things. But the difference is that the fantasies are never meant to be true, never meant to be real, and but dreams is something that is and can be achievable. So there are many technologies that might seem nice, but they might exhaust all the resources of the community with no gain in the end. On dreams, on the other hand, are achievable. So here at the Institute and also at our ad hoc group on digital equality and domains, we have a dream that equality and sustainability of indigenous languages, especially critically endangered ones in the digital world, is achievable. And digital world, especially from the future perspective, is crucial to ensuring digital diversity of the world and future prosperity of all indigenous languages. Thank you, Diano, and have a nice celebration.
Thank you so much, Vance. That was really interesting. And
Hello,
oh, again, I won't say long. I know we are behind in schedule, so I'm going to thank every panelist again and take a few questions in the chat. The first one is to Dr. Khan and Mr. Abdulaziz. Both, we can start with Mr. Khan and then Mr. Abdulaziz. The question is, how can translators and interpreters avoid or manage linguistic relativity? In my understanding, language affects the structure and content of thought, eventually the way we perceive reality. So the floor to you, Mr. Khan, to answer this question, and Mr. Abdulaziz, if you want to also answer it, please.
Thank you so much for the question. I understand that translators are normatively bilingual persons. Being bilingual persons, they have commendable proficiency and in the languages concerned, in the pair of languages concerned. And when they know the languages very well, it is assumed that they will have the worldviews inherited from both the languages concerned. I stop here to allow Mr. Abdulaziz to reflect on this question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I second what he just said, and I'd like to add from a perspective of an interpreter trainer, is that it should be like, if I might say, a prerequisite that an interpreter be a mediator, someone in the middle, a cultural ambassador of both cultures. So we're not simply linguistic decoders. We are the cultural, as I said, ambassadors, and we understand the culture and we know how to convert it. So that's why we say sometimes that being a bilingual is not necessarily a qualification to become a translator or an interpreter. You have to know the nuances of both source and target languages or cultures.
Thank you, Mr. Abdulaziz. Thank you, Dr. Khan. There is another question to you, Mr. Abdulaziz, about interpreting training. How do we keep interpreters in constant training without secluding them in terms of language combination?
Well, you see, well, I've done this, and I've done it over 2 years. My students, I've used this approach because I had a mixture of students in my class. Like out of 3 groups of students, I would say roughly 30, 35 students, I only had 3 who spoke my language combination. And this is what I'm going to tell them what I tell my students in the first class. This is not a language class. You are the language and cultural experts in this class. And my task is to make you able to interpret in a professional way, regardless of your language combination. So I think that's a way of putting it. And just to go back, I have to say that, or maybe give a disclaimer, this is not ideal. This is not the ideal situation. The ideal situation is that the trainer would speak both, or the language pair itself. It's not ideal, but it's a promising approach, a promising fix for a global issue, if I might say.
Thank you, Mr. Abdulaziz. I'd like to just go quickly to one or two comments that are in the chat as well, so people could also see them. There are lots of positive congratulations to Dr. Khan, and also thank him from Julie to Valtz about the emphasis on the importance of coordination with and the benefit of the indigenous community in question. To be honest, I echo this, and thank you for Julie for that, because I echo this passion and being advocates for indigenous languages and the few case studies we have heard throughout the session today. So thank you so much again to our panelists, to the Translation Commons and UNESCO for this great initiative. I'm very privileged to be part of it and to continue to work with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hanem, and thank you all the presenters. We would like to move on to our final session, and I would like to introduce to you the moderator, Mr. Michael Wynn, Digital Applications Librarian at Mukurtu CMS at Washington State University in the US. Michael?
Thank you, Jeanette. So at the United Nations General Assembly last week in New York, Meta, Hugging Face, and UNESCO presented a new language translator built on top of Meta's No Language Left Behind open source AI model. This new translator is capable of text translation across 200 languages, including many low-resource languages. And because the underlying model is open source, others can continue to build and refine on top of it. Now, Ms. Sharon Yang, Innovation Programs and Partnerships, and Mr. Kevin Chan, Global Policy Campaign Strategies Director for Meta, will share more details and show a short video demonstration of the translator. Kevin, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can people hear me? Yeah, so
Yes.
I think Sharon is on the call, but I think I am tagged as the person who's going to speak today. But there's Sharon if you can see her. Well, thank you very much. I don't know if we have the video recording ready to load, but I think we could probably run it while I'm just sort of talking through some of the remarks that I prepared. So if people want to project it, or is it projected? I just want to confirm that it is before I begin.
Not yet, but we can get that started.
Okay, great. Well, I'll start, and then as whenever you guys are able to do it, then I think you should just feel free to run the video. So again, thanks very much, Michael. Today, September 30th, is of course International Translation Day, but it is also Truth and Reconciliation Day in Canada, where I am based, a day to recognize the negative generational impact caused by the Canadian Indian residential school system. It is also a day for Canadians to reflect on the journey of Indigenous reconciliation that the country is on, including with respect to Indigenous languages. And I think maybe someone just needs to press play on the video, and I think maybe we will get an animation going. There we go. There we go. So in this context, I am very pleased to be able to share with you all today a new online language translator, a collaboration between UNESCO, Hugging Face, and Meta that is built on top of Meta's No Language Left Behind open source AI model and accessible for free to anybody with an internet connection. The translator is capable of translating text across 200 written languages and includes 3 times more low-resource languages than high-resource ones. I should note here that because the No Language Left Behind model is open source, any individual or community can take this model and build their own applications on top of it, which is really exciting to see, and we hope that it will indeed, over time, help democratize access. We announced this translator, as Michael was saying, just last Monday during the United Nations General Assembly Week, and we hope that over time it will become a valuable tool for different language communities around the world. I'd like to share with you the story, if I may, of how this wonderful collaboration came to be. Some years ago, before I held my current role at Meta, I was the head of public policy at Facebook Canada, where I was responsible for, among other things, developing stronger partnerships with Indigenous communities. One of these partnerships was translation work with Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated, or NTI, the organization charged with implementing Inuit economic, social, and cultural well-being in Canada's High North through the Nunavut Land Claims Agreement. Specifically, Meta and NTI came together to translate the Facebook platform into Inuktitut, the Indigenous language of the Inuit, so that the platform could be better served as an expressive platform for the Inuit and better reflect the cultural reality of their communities. The project would last over 5 years and was not without its challenges and setbacks. But in the end, perseverance and a strong commitment to collaboration resulted in a comprehensive, in a translation offering that I think we feel relatively good about. To be sure, it is not comprehensive or perfect, but I am pleased to say that you can now select Inuktitut as the default interface language for Facebook on desktop. The person, of course, to whom we owe a lot of thanks for this initiative is the president of Nunavut Tungavik, Luki Kotiark, who was my partner on this 5-year project. She was also the co-chair of the Task Force for the International Decade of Indigenous Languages, and it was she who first put UNESCO in touch with me. Last November, UNESCO invited me to their headquarters in Paris to participate in a panel discussion on our Inuktitut translation work, and they asked how else we might leverage digital technologies to further drive impact for the International Decade. We discussed Meta's breakthrough No Language Left Behind open source AI model, capable, as I said, of translating text across 200 languages. And as it was open source, NLB was available free online for anyone to use. So with a bit of further discussion, we settled on building an accessible translation interface powered by NLLB, and our friends at Hugging Face helped build the translator, which is now hosted on Hugging Face Spaces, their online demo platform. UNESCO, Meta, and Hugging Face came together just last Monday, as Michael said, in New York during United Nations General Assembly Week to share the news of our translator, and we look forward to hopefully more collaborations in future. I want to thank in particular colleagues at UNESCO who helped make this happen, including Yako and Banu, and I think I saw David here as well, David Castillo, for their personal partnership. It's really been instrumental in making this translator possible, and I'm very proud of the contribution we are making to the international translation community. So thank you very much for this opportunity to share this good news with you all on International Translation Day. You can access the translator. I think you saw it briefly, the URL on the video, but just to repeat it again, it is huggingface.co/spaces/UNESCO/NLLB. And I'll try to maybe drop the link in the chat thread. But with that, I would love it to turn it back to Michael. And I don't know if there are any questions or comments, but obviously would love to spend a little bit of time engaging. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Appreciate that very much. I haven't seen any questions so far, and we are running a little behind on schedule. So I think at this time, we will hand it over to, or Jeanette, if you want to introduce Tex, leave that to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Michael and Kevin. And it's great to see, this new, tool available for Indigenous languages. Closing today's celebration is Mr. Tex Texin, a globalization architect and also on the board of advisors for Translation Commons in the US. Tex?
Yes. Hello, everyone. And thank you, Jeanette. And thank you, Kevin. That's an exciting announcement. I was very glad to hear that. So my name is Tex Texan. I'm a globalization architect, and I'm one of the technical advisors to Translation Commons and a contributor to the Language Digitization Initiative. I promise not to speak very long. I know we're running a little bit long, but I do want to remark what an amazing event. Speaking for myself, I enjoyed the panel and the presentations, and I've learned quite a bit, and I was quite thrilled at the diversity of speakers that we've had from every region of the world, it seems. So, also, I do know that we have many questions that were sent into the chat. We didn't have time to answer them all, but we will track them, and if we can get the speakers to respond, maybe we can post answers on the on our website. So I would like to say that I came away with several takeaways from the many speakers. There were so many that I can't mention them all. but I would like to touch on a couple. If our audience would like to add their takeaways that were significant to them, they can add them in the chat or as comments on YouTube in the stream, and we will collect them and also share those with the speakers and on our website. We began the day with a presentation of a panel on ethical issues, and it was striking the way it was presented, the commercial exploitation of the communities, the potential loss of worldview, and a few other problems that were raised. And I think it's important that the articulation of the problem, raising the awareness, is necessary before we can begin to solve them. And I thought that was well done. I especially liked the analogy to strip mining in terms of how data mining is affecting communities. And I guess I still struggle a little bit with, no matter how you mine, the landscape is changed. And so I'm interested to see more of the solutions. We did see examples of problem translations, but we saw a few ideas that would be helpful. First and foremost, and this is something I've heard in many areas around translation and interpretation for Indigenous language communities, is that it's important to involve the community in the process and steering the translations and getting consent from the community, and having respect for the community and their ideas and worldview. So that is first and foremost. But I also like the idea of a balanced content translation, that as much material is being translated from the majority languages into the Indigenous community language, there should also be a significant amount of translation going in the other direction, taking the Indigenous language community content, their folklore, their stories, and bringing them into the majority languages. I was also appreciative of the dubbing as a solution, and that's something we see in Roy's presentation, and then also I know it's also a part of what Dev Kumar and Sunawar are doing, so I think this is tremendous. I did learn a new term today, cosmopolitical terms. I thought that was valuable to me. And I especially like the idea of the flags being translated into fishing sticks. We do have a need for an ethical legal framework around translation in order to manage exploitation. And we heard several people talk about the need not only for community being compensated for the data that they're contributing, but also the individual translators to have some compensation and be protected from being exploited. And part of this is also capacity building. And I like the idea of language neutral training as a way to manage how translations are done and have that be a part of the capacity building process. So I think there were many good topics here. I have several more takeaways, but since we're running long, I'll move on. So with that, I would also like to mention that we, Translation Commons, have intentions to create additional events in support of cultural diversity and recognizing cultures of other regions as well. If you are interested in helping us with this, let us know via You'll see an email address come up shortly, krista@translationcommons.org, or our other social media. As you know, we're entirely volunteer-based and nonprofit organizations, so our volunteers are very influential in driving the activities we create, and you can help create events around topics or communities where your interest lies. So you'll see shortly a slide with all of our social media and contact information. We are planning another event for January. This will be an in-person event in California, the Silicon Valley Bay Area. The details will be announced shortly. This event is sponsored jointly by UNESCO and the International Decade of Indigenous Languages and Translation Commons. As you know, we've hosted terrific events like this one in the past few years, and they're always well attended and receive many accolades. So this year we intend to exceed that success. In addition, several of our experts are speaking about language digitization and our initiatives at several conferences and other events. If you follow our social media, you will receive announcements with the details. You can also watch videos from these events on our YouTube channel. So with that, I would like to thank, on behalf of Translation Commons, all of our speakers and the many volunteers that worked so hard behind the scenes today and for several months prior to bring this event together. And we will be continuing to make the videos and slides available to everyone. We're especially grateful to our contributors who generously gave their time and condensed many years' worth of experience and insights into their presentations. So I didn't see if you ran the slides with all the presenters and contributors. I would also like to point out there's a QR code on the screen. This will take you to a survey, and if you would be good enough to, it's a very short 5-question or so survey just to give us feedback, and there's an opportunity on the survey for you to make additional comments as well. That's helpful to us in planning future events and giving feedback to all of the speakers. So with that, this event has come to a close. And however, our work on the International Decade of Indigenous Languages is ongoing. With your help, we would like to, we look forward to continuing this effort and marking our progress next year and every year on this date until we can host this event with simultaneous interpretation and transcription in many Indigenous languages. Thank you all for attending and for your support. Thank you.